the Admiral of Hogwarts. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author. We are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 351 Emission. The new rocket launch site is more than 300 nautical miles from the west coast of Mexico and consists of two parts, a fixed base located in a trench thousands of meters underwater, and an attached mobile launch platform. As everyone knows, due to the presence of water pressure, the depth of underwater rocket launches should preferably not exceed 30 meters, otherwise, a successful launch is impossible. That's why the ship girls designed a mobile launch platform attached to the underwater base. Normally, this platform docks near the base for resupply activities, and when a launch is required, the platform floats to about 30 meters below the surface for launch. Are you sure this thing is really just a mobile launch platform? After teleporting to this underwater base, Hugo was shocked by what he saw through the observation window because that launch platform is nearly 140 meters long and 14 meters wide. Although its appearance is very streamlined, Hugo can tell that it looks exactly like a submarine. This is actually our experimental product. Its official name should be Underwater High-Speed Mobile Launch Platform. Besides facilitating covert launches, the most important thing is to test a series of subsystems, Akaji said with a smile, such as room temperature superconducting magnetohydrodynamic propulsion technology, controlled nuclear fusion technology, in-space resource recycling life support systems, and a complete magic camouflage system. And then you created this, the most advanced ballistic missile nuclear submarine on Earth. Looking at the 24 carrier rocket launch ports on this platform, Hugo felt like he had a mouthful stuck in his throat, unsure how to spit it out. No, my dear Admiral. Unlike those weapons, this is indeed a peaceful means of transportation, Akaji said with a sly smile on her face. For safety, cost-effectiveness, and stealth, we do need multiple covert carriers to launch rockets into the sky from multiple points, in order to complete construction as quickly as possible. Okay, that's definitely peaceful, Hugo said, twitching the corners of his mouth and shrugging his shoulders. About how much material can this thing carry into orbit at once? Due to the use of space expansion spells, each rocket can carry approximately no more than 100,000 cubic meters and no more than 100,000 tons of goods, Akaji replied, and one launch platform can launch 24 rockets at a time. We now have 6 launch platforms located in various oceans around the world, 100,000 tons at a time. Hugo was so astonished that he couldn't speak, because the most powerful rocket in human history, the Saturn V, could only launch 130 tons of payload at a time. Yes, this is the charm of combining magic and technology, Akaji said, looking at the launch platform outside the porthole that was loading rockets. It's just that magic also has some inherent flaws. For example, this space spell can only last for 3 days, so it needs to be constantly maintained to be used normally. Also, due to cost issues, even with constant maintenance, the continuous maintenance time will not exceed 1 month. The only fortunate thing is that, with the help of the computers carried by Ulsan and Missouri, we have designed magical computers that can perform large-scale data calculations, and with the help of those computers, we can now expand the original static to static space teleportation to static to dynamic, and even dynamic to dynamic in the future. However, with everyone's current technology, this type of space transmission network will be limited to the transmission of personnel and small items for a long time, so most of the items still need to be transported by rockets from various platforms. This is already very good, Hugo said, waving his hand while checking the construction plan in the Admiral network. At least after the first batch of personnel is launched, they only need to build a teleportation magic circle to rotate personnel. Moreover, as ship girls, everyone's ship equipment space can more or less carry various materials, which is more than enough for early construction. While Hugo was checking those materials, there were also many improvement plans related to the launch platform and launch vehicle. After all, it is impossible for ship girls to do this kind of work forever in the future, so a lot of improvements are related to ordinary people's operation. The biggest plan is related to the Mars base. In addition to the space dock located in Mars synchronous orbit, there are also mines located in the asteroid belt, and these are mainly aimed at the followers who are now human beings. Just as Hugo was checking those documents, the final loading and overhaul work had also ended, and the Laffey sisters, as the first astronauts, had also successfully arrived at the predetermined location. After preparing, the mobile platform left the deep-sea base. 3 hours later, the mobile launch platform carrying the rocket reached a launch position and floated to the specified launch depth. With everything ready, Hugo and the others came to the control center under Akaji's leadership, ready to watch the ship girl's first rocket launch. Several people quietly came to the guest seats without disturbing anyone. At this time, the sound in the launch control hall was constant, and the staff was nervously scheduling, and the viewing seats specially separated by glass around the hall were also crowded with people. Almost everyone who didn't have work to do at hand stood here, looking at everything in this hall with eager eyes. 10, 9, 8, 7. As the sound of the countdown began to echo in the monitoring hall, almost everyone's heart was raised. The reason why everyone here was attracted was because of the idea of exploring the universe. This launch is the most critical step in putting the whole idea into practice. Although everyone has a chance to start over if it fails, as the first launch, everyone hopes to have a good start. 2, 1, ignite. As the order was issued, the two people in charge of this launch, Soviet Union and St. George, simultaneously turned a key on their respective control panels. Just as they turned the key into place, a loud noise came from the launch platform more than 100 nautical miles away, and then a huge rocket quickly rose to the surface of the sea wrapped in a large number of bubbles. Almost in the blink of an eye, the rocket successfully reached the surface of the sea, and then a large amount of bright flame emerged from the tail of the rocket. Then it pierced the sky at the same time. Several magic runes on the rocket's outer shell were quickly activated, and as an energy like a ripple of water spread around, the entire rocket was completely hidden by magic. At this time, neither wizards nor ordinary people could detect the launch of the rocket with various tools. Only Hugo and their control center could see this spectacular scene. Gulf of Mexico monitoring station monitoring normal. Atlantic monitoring station monitoring normal. As the rocket flew, one signal after another came from those mobile launch platforms in other sea areas that had been arranged in advance. Just like what was seen in the previous data, these mobile launch platforms are not only launch platforms, but also monitoring stations. Of course, these ocean mobile monitoring stations will only be the beginning of the monitoring network construction. In the future, ship girls will also launch artificial communication satellites around the Earth to complete this network. Chapter 352 Success. An hour later, the rocket successfully reached its designated orbit. As soon as this news spread, the control hall erupted in cheers. People stood up, jumping and shouting at the top of their lungs. Not only in this underwater base, but also in all the bases in various locations, everyone watching or listening to this report was excitedly shouting. Immediately afterwards, the two ship girls directly left the spacecraft and expanded the effective range of the concealment runes on the spacecraft, and then began to assemble the parts that had been launched into the sky earlier. The first thing to be assembled will be the space transfer magic array and its supporting facilities. This entire system was developed from the Flu network, Repulse whispered to Hugo, explaining, "It must be said that Nicholas Flamel's legacy has played a significant role. We never imagined before that he was also the original designer of the Flu network, and with the detailed design ideas and structural diagrams left by him, we have successfully created the current space teleportation magic array by referring to these drawings. According to the plan, this magic array will be the first thing that Laffey and the others need to build. And after the magic array is built, the subsequent series of personnel and materials can be quickly transported up, because the magic array was designed to be modular in advance, and the ship girls had practiced many times on the ground. Their work efficiency was much higher than ordinary astronauts, so the magic array was put into use only half an hour after arriving at the location in the control center. Hugo saw through the display screen that several ship girls located on the East Coast, West Balkans, England, Japan, and other places stepped onto the magic array and then appeared at the construction site in Earth's geosynchronous orbit. There's a small problem, looking at the ship girls busying around on the screen. Hugo asked curiously, where does the energy for these magic arrays come from? The energy of these magic arrays comes from the energy generated by controlled nuclear fusion. Repulse pointed to a giant metal cube with a surface covered with runes, looking like a 10-meter x 10 meters x 10 meters cube, which Missouri took out of her ship equipment space. In fact, the conversion between different energies is not as complicated as everyone thinks. It's just that the loss is too great to convert lower-level energy sources such as electrical energy, light energy, and thermal energy into higher-level energy sources such as magic power. Therefore, in daily life, the practice of using lower-level energy sources such as electrical energy or light energy to charge magic props is actually a very uneconomical thing. However, with controlled nuclear fusion, this energy conversion method has strong practicality. Compared with the limit that current technology can achieve, the effect of magic energy is obviously more flexible. Actually, I think you may be limited by some kind of thinking here. Hearing this, Hugo suddenly interrupted Repulse's introduction somewhat rudely, and then said seriously, different worlds have different characteristics. Since this world has magic, then perhaps combining with magic is the truly correct path for technological development. You're right, we've been limited. After hearing Hugo's words, Repulse was stunned for a moment, and then replied after quickly exchanging a bunch of information in the Admiral network. Different worlds may look very similar, but the basic rules at the bottom of the world may be completely different. In this case, trying to copy the practices of the previous world will obviously cause many problems. For example, the reason why we are now able to carry out interstellar travel is that the most core technologies require the power of magic to help, such as room temperature superconductors, energy internal circulation systems, space teleportation, or controlled nuclear fusion. Yes, when different worlds develop technology, they often have technologies that are suitable for the local area. Forcibly applying them will affect the speed of overall development instead, because there were warehouses that released a large number of space folding spells and the ship equipment space of the ship girls, and the ship girls as builders were able to cast spells. The space station was built very quickly. When Hugo and Hermione went to the rocket control center for breakfast the next day, they were surprised to find that the main part of the first phase of the space station project had been roughly completed, and the second batch of non-ship girl astronauts began to enter the space station for internal repairs for safety reasons. Most of the second batch of non-ship girl astronauts, except for a small number of people, were wizards or those new transcendents who had just been born with the help of powered armor. The work efficiency of these people was far better than ordinary humans. Together with the ship girls working outside, they quickly promoted the construction of the space station. This efficiency far exceeds all known space projects. If there were no magic, I believe it would be extremely difficult to send so many things into Earth's orbit, let alone build this thing in such a short period of time. Looking at the rapidly increasing percentage number of the space station completion progress on the screen, Hugo said with emotion. Because among similar space stations, whether it is Mir or the International Space Station, the construction time is calculated in years. It's not just magic, there is also a lot of work that only we ship girls can complete, Repulse explained seriously. And our next job is to improve this system as much as possible to ensure that the vast majority of the work can be taken over by humans. After all, the number of us ship girls is really too small. In this case, choosing to master key irreplaceable projects instead of mastering all content is a reasonable choice, because Hugo and Hermione had to take the Hogwarts Express back to school early the next morning, and it was basically certain that this launch was successful. The ship girls held a lively dinner party that night. Why is everyone looking at me now? After entering the banquet hall, Hugo could clearly feel that many people were looking at him. In fact, he had noticed this before in the launch control center, but at that time he was in the VIP seat, and he thought that some people might be curious. But now it seems a little strange, because the transcendents other than the wizards present can feel the special aura on you, Repulse explained softly. After all, whether it is St. Georgia or the Soviet Union, the source of their abilities still comes from you. Therefore, they, who are summoned by the ship girls, can naturally feel your summoning to their souls in the dark, and at the same time they will have heartfelt respect and loyalty to you. Moreover, we have always been promoting your existence during the promotion. In this case, everyone will naturally be a little curious about you, such a young leader. In this way, everyone will naturally focus their attention on you. Especially for many people, they may hope to take this opportunity to observe you carefully. I can understand. This is similar to the practice of employees observing the level of the boss. Hugo nodded. After all, the leader of an organization is related to the future of this organization, and naturally also to the future of every member. However, in this way, Hugo had a more troublesome task before eating. That is, he needed to give a speech before the banquet started to show everyone the way forward. Chapter 353 May the glory of mankind last forever. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to be able to give a speech at this time. Of course, I will ensure that this speech is as short as possible. After all, everyone will be eating later. After everyone was seated, Hugo came to the podium in the auditorium to begin his speech. When he finished the first sentence, the people in attendance laughed and relaxed. Today, our space program has taken its first step. In this era where ignorance and knowledge coexist, we can say that we have taken a crucial step towards knowledge and civilization. No one knows how far we can go on this road of civilization, but from the existing history, we have been moving forward along this road. And the speed of progress is getting faster and faster. A successful launch like today is indeed a very important step. But this step, while dispelling old evils, will also spawn new evils, new ignorance, new problems, and new dangers. The vision that space presents will certainly yield huge rewards, but it will also be accompanied by huge difficulties and high costs, so sometimes, people will be confused or even hesitate to move forward. But what I want to say is that all great and glorious actions are accompanied by great difficulties, and completing these actions requires a spirit of continuous progress and corresponding courage. Maintaining the status quo may be more comfortable, but this comfort may completely destroy us. And us here does not only refer to those of you present, but all of humanity. Hugo's speech, accompanied by the unique spiritual infection of the ancient god Admiral, quickly permeated the souls of everyone present, and everyone listened attentively to his speech. Progress is not only necessary, but also urgent. If our progress slows down, then we will fall into internal friction, and then destroy all of humanity. For example, more than half a century ago, a wizard named Grindelwald tried to rule all of humanity. And the theory he relied on was that wizards are superior to non-magical ordinary people. Upon hearing this, everyone present, including the wizards, shook their heads. The wizards recruited by the ship girls were either muggle-born or half-bloods, so naturally they hated this theory. Of course, this theory is insidious, because through this theory, the other party can propose that pure-blood wizards who have mastered more powerful magic and deeper knowledge are even more superior, and Grindelwald is the most superior of them all, and as this is promoted step by step, the entire world will become a pyramid structure. Grindelwald rules those pure-blood wizards, and the pure-blood wizards rule the half-bloods and muggle-born. At the very bottom are ordinary people who have no magic at all. At least I think that such a structure is very unfavorable to everyone present, because those pure-blood wizards in high positions will obviously monopolize all the resources and knowledge in order to protect their own interests, and all of us present are just slaves. That's right, that's how it is. We will never be slaves. At this point, the emotions of everyone present were stirred up, because everyone knew that if Grindelwald had really won and realized his plan, everyone present would be slaves. Why was Grindelwald able to incite so many people? As far as I know, among the people he incited, there were many people similar to us in status. After everyone's emotions eased a little, Hugo continued his speech. It's very simple. This is because the development speed of the wizarding world is lower than that of the ordinary people's world. At the same time, the resources on Earth are limited. Therefore, everyone fell into the Thucydides trap. Grindelwald regarded wizards and ordinary people as two competing entities. He believed that the development of the ordinary people's world would eventually threaten the wizarding world, and then completely destroy the wizarding world. From a certain point of view, his view has a certain rationality. Because at that time, people's vision was limited to the Earth, and the boundary between wizards and ordinary people could not be broken. Under such a premise, when two beings with obvious differences need to compete for a limited resource, war is naturally unavoidable. But the solution given by Grindelwald is either harboring ambitions or having water in his brain. Because what he claims to be fighting against is the arrogance of ordinary people, the of power, and barbarism and unreasonableness. Just think about it with your brain, and you will know that these things that he claims to be fighting against are not unique to ordinary people, but are universally present in human beings. If you look at it proportionally, the proportion of fools among wizards is similar to that of ordinary people, and from such a stupid judgment, the solution proposed by the other party is to suppress the development of the entire human society, and stabilize the entire human society by fixing the pace of human beings. For example, the reason why a large amount of resources are not enough now is purely because of the development of technology. For example, in the era without industry, oil must be enough, because the demand for oil is very small just for lighting and heating. What Grindelwald wants to do is to keep human beings in that low consumption era forever, and allow human beings to survive at a low cost by destroying the future of human beings. But now, we can take some more positive measures to deal with the problems that the entire human race will face. Speaking of this, Hugo raised his voice and said, "Now, We have mastered the method to break through the boundary between wizards and humans, so that the two originally seemingly uncompromising beings no longer have the previous estrangement. More importantly, compared to the resource-limited Earth, we now have a universe with almost unlimited resources to develop, opening up a path that was never imagined in that era. The reason why we made the decision to explore the universe is not because this matter is simple, but precisely because it is difficult to achieve this matter. In this process, we will pay a lot of manpower, material resources, and even sacrifice. But all this is worth it, because this goal will promote us to achieve the best organization and test our top technology and strength. These jobs will not only generate a large number of emerging jobs and technological improvements to promote the development of the entire human society, but more importantly, they will enable us to open up a brand new era of space exploration for the entire human race. Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory died while climbing Mount Everest. Someone once asked him why he wanted to climb Mount Everest, and he replied, "Because it's there, okay, space is there, and we will invest in exploration. The moon and other planets are there. And new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. I believe that now we will have an unprecedented bright future. And as pioneers, we will surely leave our most important page in human history." Speaking of this, because the atmosphere at the scene was a bit hot-blooded, Hugo suddenly gave a military salute, and then shouted the slogan that he thought was a bit chunibayao before, "For all mankind." When Hugo's last words fell, everyone present stood up, including the military personnel, including the ship girls, raised their hands to the side of their foreheads and gave a military salute, while the remaining civilian personnel raised their right arms flat and placed their right hands on the heart. Then, they shouted another slogan at the same time, "May human glory last forever." Chapter 354 Back to School. Good job, Hugo. After finishing the speech and announcing the start of the banquet, Hugo returned to the side of the dining table. As soon as he sat down, his sister patted him on the shoulder and praised him. "It seems you've grown up now. At least your performance in the speech just now was very good. At least I think everyone in the audience listened to your speech." "Actually, my speech isn't the main reason everyone is excited," Hugo shrugged and said. "I think the real reason everyone is so excited is because we did it. You know, language is powerless compared to facts. No matter how good the speech is, it can only excite everyone for a while. Only facts can penetrate people's hearts. The reason everyone is so excited now is because the ship girls have indeed done a very good job, allowing everyone to see a bright future." So, in an atmosphere of excitement, the entire banquet came to a successful conclusion. The next morning, Hugo and Hermione returned to London through the subdimensional connection and boarded the Hogwarts Express. "What's wrong? You seem a little listless." On the train, Hugo noticed that his sister seemed a little down, so he curiously asked, "It's nothing, I just suddenly feel unmotivated." Hermione tucked the hair that had fallen in front of her face behind her ear, then raised her head and said, "I always feel that everything in school has become unusually small compared to what I saw before. You know, my biggest goal before was to become the Minister of Magic. But I think compared to the Starry Sky, the Ministry of Magic, or even the entire wizarding world, is really not worth mentioning." "Okay, I understand what you're thinking." Hugo immediately understood the reason why his sister looked a little depressed. "It's the same principle as sometimes ignorance is bliss, but you don't need to worry like this at all. You know, we now have a long time, so you don't have to be too entangled in this kind of thing. You can first take the Minister of Magic as your goal here, and then consider other things when the time comes. After all, our future plans also require a large number of management personnel, and the Minister of Magic is a very good transitional position." "The way you say that, I think other wizards would probably be pissed off if they heard it." After hearing Hugo say this, Hermione chuckled because after being told this by Hugo, she realized at this time that her worries were completely unnecessary. For those ship girls who have a long life, choosing everything when facing a choice is also a good option. After calming down, Hermione's spirit suddenly cheered up from the depression just now. Unlike ordinary ship girls, as a ship girl converted from a human, she retains more of the human side, so she always has some special ideas. Indeed, some of these special ideas will bring new, positive thinking or new ideas to the ship girls, but other parts may bring some negative things. Fortunately, the Admiral Network can always sense this type of information and make timely judgments, so that the situation does not deteriorate significantly. Soon, everything in the school returned to normal, but although it is already January, spring is obviously not coming so soon. On the first day of class, the grounds were still covered with thick snow, and fine water droplets condensed on the windows of the greenhouse. They couldn't see the scenery outside the window at all when they had herbology class. It's not a good idea to go to outdoor classes in this kind of weather, especially when you need to deal with blast-ended scroots. Fortunately, when they arrived at the edge of the forbidden forest, Hagrid changed the teaching content. This may be related to his recent success in love, so when everyone gathered together to prepare for class, they found that Hagrid didn't bring those disgusting blast-ended scroots, but instead let a winged horse out of the stable. Madame Maxime has generously allowed me to introduce these big guys from the south of France to everyone, Hagrid introduced to everyone while pulling on the reins on the horse's halter. Everyone unreservedly expressed their love for this kind of horse, especially Quidditch enthusiasts. Because the history of magic once said that the flying runes on the earliest flying broomsticks came from the natural patterns on the wings of this magical creature. Yes, most of the flying power of these horses comes from the magical structure on their wings. Otherwise, with their not so large wings and tons of weight, they definitely couldn't fly by relying on their physical bodies alone. Hagrid really has a way of dealing with magical creatures. When it was first let out of the stable, this horse shook its head uncomfortably because of the outside temperature, but after Hagrid offered a barrel of wine, it immediately calmed down and started drinking the whiskey in the barrel. Winged horses generally look very similar to winged palomino horses, and the muscles on their bodies are full of strength. The light golden fur and silver mane add a touch of elegance to this horse in addition to its strength. "Oh, it's so beautiful," Lisa Turpin whispered. "I heard that this kind of horse only has wild populations in the central United States, and only Britons and the magic ministries of a few major countries can breed them. It's difficult for ordinary people to see them." "Miss Turpin, you're right," Hagrid nodded at this time and said. "This is mainly because the cost of raising this kind of horse is too expensive. On average, one horse may consume hundreds of galleons a month. The reason why it costs so much money is that, on the one hand, the only food this kind of horse will eat, other than certain precious herbs, is hand-brewed high-end whiskey, and on the other hand, their adaptability is relatively poor." Obviously, Hagrid's knowledge of magical animals is not limited to those fierce monsters. He knows no less about these noble creatures. However, from Hagrid's tone, Hugo felt that he probably thought in his heart that it would be better if such a strong horse had claws and teeth and liked to eat raw meat in large mouthfuls. "I thought this kind of horse was a purely artificially cultivated creature," Hermione said softly while taking notes. "Because almost all books only say that this kind of horse drinks high-end whiskey. Actually, this is part of the wizard's propaganda," Hugo also said softly. "Historically, wizards once hunted this animal extensively because their diet contained a large number of valuable herbs. However, as the number of this animal decreased significantly, the wizards realized that they needed to protect this magical animal. So, there was this new propaganda to reduce the wizards' disgust for this magical creature. This is really..." After hearing Hugo's explanation, Hermione shook her head. "Obviously, this kind of protection that is purely out of utilitarianism always makes people want to complain. Obviously, this beautiful magical creature attracts everyone's attention more." When the class bell rang, the students realized that the time of this class had passed so quickly. When leaving the playground, every student expressed their satisfaction with this class. In particular, many girls hoped that Hagrid could maintain this state now, because those sticky blast-ended scroots were really disgusting. Chapter 355 Hogsmeade Day. Because there were no classes afterward, Hugo and the other two stayed at Hagrid's invitation, planning to chat, drink tea, and return to the castle after dinner. Of course, considering Rita Skeeter, who was practically omnipresent in the original text, Hugo carefully checked the surroundings with magic as soon as he entered the hut and set up defensive spells to ensure that annoying beetle wouldn't come eavesdropping. Olymp told me that as part of a school exchange, her students might want to audit Hogwarts' Care of Magical Creatures class, Hagrid said as he poured tea for everyone. "I figured the French probably wouldn't appreciate animals that are too strong, so I prepared some pretty little creatures for them. And today, this horse is for practice." As he spoke, Hagrid walked to Hugo's side and whispered while pouring tea. "Thanks for the warning, too. I've heard from quite a few people that Olymp has been under a lot of pressure these years. It's true that some things are better left unsaid. Olymp, have you and Madame Maxime started calling each other by your first names? Looks like your relationship is progressing quickly," Hugo said after taking a sip of tea. "I think I need to change my teaching plan. Madame Maxime thinks my course content isn't very popular with the girls, at least. Hermione, Veneto, what do you think?" Faced with Hugo's teasing, Hagrid awkwardly changed the subject. If he didn't have a full beard, his whole face would probably be red right now. Yes, I think you could add some animals that most people like among those, more popular animals with you. That way, the teaching effect should be better. Hermione carefully offered her opinion. Seeing blast-ended Scroots every class was really terrible for most people, although she wasn't worried about those animals hurting herself now. The animals' appearance alone made people unhappy. Yes, Hermione is right, Veneto nodded. And even just from the perspective of the course, it's very inappropriate to spend several weeks talking about blast-ended Scroots, a magical creature that's not even on the syllabus. Okay, I think you might be right. Hagrid, in love, wasn't as stubborn as he used to be. In the following time, he even discussed with Hugo and the others which animals would be more suitable to study in the second half of the semester. I hope Hagrid can maintain this state, Hermione said on the way back to the castle. That depends on how long this relationship of his lasts. Hugo also silently prayed that Hagrid's love life would go smoothly. Unless Hagrid could improve the blast-ended Scroot species to make them edible, he would definitely not like this thing that looks like a deformed snot slug. The following days were just the same as usual, until the arrival of Hogsmeade Day in mid-January. After finishing breakfast early this morning, Hugo, Hermione, and Veneto left the castle together, crossed the cold, damp grounds, and walked towards the school gate. When they passed a black lake, they saw Krum walk from the cabin to the deck, wearing only swimming trunks. Then he walked all the way to the ship's side and jumped into the lake. Looks like Krum already knows what the next task will be, Veneto said as Krum splashed a burst of water on the calm lake surface. I hope he can withstand the water temperature of the Black Lake in spring. While strolling on the streets of Hogsmeade, Hugo tried to find someone suspicious. For example, someone who had taken Polyjuice Potion, but his luck wasn't enough to let him directly encounter the target on the street. Fortunately, he didn't expect this method to succeed in waiting for the rabbit, so after strolling around the street, they walked together towards the Three Broomsticks pub to get something to drink. The tavern was as lively as usual. After all, the British traditionally regarded the tavern as the main social venue, which caused Hugo to spend some time squeezing to the front of the counter to order 2 butterbeers with heated ginger powder and maple syrup. Through the mirror behind the bar, Hugo saw Ludo Bagman's figure reflected in the mirror. He was sitting with a group of goblins in a dim corner. Bagman was lowering his voice and quickly saying something to the goblins, who were crossing their arms with ugly faces, looking aggressive. It seemed that Ludo was likely setting up bets on the Triwizard Tournament again, and according to the current situation, the situation of this bet was obviously not optimistic. Bagman looked around as he spoke. Because Veneto's silver hair was so special, he immediately noticed Veneto's existence. Obviously, what Bagman was about to do was not very suitable for others to know, especially the Triwizard Tournament contestants. So, not long after discovering Veneto, he and the goblins left the bar. When they went out, they happened to brush past Harry, Ron, and Ginny. As a result, Bagman grabbed Harry to the side as if he had seen a treasure, wanting to explain something. Seeing this scene, the Weasley siblings could only shake their heads helplessly. Then, after looking around at the door, they walked to the round table where Hugo and the others were sitting and sat down. Has Harry figured out what the third task is yet? After exchanging greetings, Hugo asked Ron. Not yet. Ginny shook her head helplessly at this time, but Harry said he already had some ideas before, and sitting in the castle all day doesn't seem like he can figure anything out, so coming out for a walk today should be a good idea. That makes sense, Hugo nodded. Sometimes changing the environment may be able to give people some new inspiration, which is much better than just sitting there and racking your brains. Soon, Harry came over from Ludo Bagman's entanglement and sat down at the table. At the same time, a look full of anger appeared on his face. What did he want? Ron asked as soon as Harry sat down. He offered to help me unlock the secret of the golden egg, Harry said. To him, he felt that Bagman's approach was clearly insulting his ability and intelligence. He shouldn't do that. Everyone at the table was shocked when they heard this news, and then Ginny stared into Harry's eyes and said, "He's one of the judges." And, didn't you say you already had some ideas? Sort of, Harry stammered. We've also figured out what the second task is, after quickly exchanging opinions through the telepathy network. Hermione said. As long as you soak the golden egg in water and open it, then you can hear a new sound. Is that so, Harry? After hearing Hermione's words, Ginny turned to look at Harry and asked, "Sorry, I lied just now." Harry pursed his lips hard and said with a look of shame, then looked at Hugo and the others. Thank you very much for your help." "It's nothing. I think you would have found the correct solution to this puzzle in the next few days even if we didn't tell you," Hugo shook his head lightly. This puzzle is just a small problem. You'll know that the real difficulties have just begun after you hear it. Chapter 356 Prepare. After chatting with Harry and the others for a few words, they hurriedly left. After receiving news of the next task from Hugo, they needed to quickly return to the castle to verify it. Hugo and the others, after finishing their butterbeers, headed to the Avengers restaurant, wanting to check on the progress of their space program. Our first Earth orbit space station has been successfully constructed, Avenger told Hugo in the restaurant's secret room. We're now using both the space gate and rockets to assemble our first batch of spacecraft. Don't you all have ship equipment spaces? Hugo asked, puzzled. Why not use those to store the components? We can't. Our ship equipment space is equal to our own volume. But the volume of many of these parts exceeds the capacity of the ship equipment space, Avenger said, shrugging helplessly. In the beginning, we tried having personnel carry containers with space expansion charms through the space transfer magic circle, but we found it didn't work. We discovered that, synchronized with Earth's magnetosphere and atmosphere, there's also a magic protection field. When a spacecraft breaks through to a certain altitude, the magic in the universe gradually becomes more chaotic. Fortunately, we conducted multiple experimental rocket launches beforehand, so with various shielding measures, the overall plan isn't affected. However, these shielding measures also significantly affect many magical items. For example, besides ship equipment spaces, all other spatial devices have problems with spatial transfer. To be precise, all temporary items are unusable, Hermione said, quickly accessing information through the Admiral network, but permanent items are too expensive, and the volume inside the containers isn't that large, so, for us, using rockets that can be launched covertly with various disposable spatial items to transport goods is the best option. Understood, Hugo nodded, then asked the next question. When can our first spacecraft to the moon depart? If there are no accidents, the first batch of 5 spacecraft will land on the moon in half a month with the necessary equipment to begin construction of the lunar base. It should be fully completed by the end of the term, Avenger said seriously. Of course, this completion is just the first step. The goal is to build a small base capable of independently producing small Earth-Moon spacecraft and sustaining 150 to 200 people for long-term work and life. That's already amazing. Most North and South Pole research stations don't have that many people, Hugo said, nodding with satisfaction. Especially with the help of magic, the base's production efficiency should be more than 10 times that of a normal base. That's right, the base will be highly automated, Repulse said seriously. We'll also invest in a series of improved versions of Nicholas Flamel's manufactured puppets to replace human labor. These so-called improved puppet automatons are actually various robots, except the magical parts replace the unreliable computer systems of this era. Besides these highly intelligent puppet automatons, there are even more simple existences controlled by circuit boards, such as the industrial robots on the production line. However, for ease of control, the core of these industrial robots uses alchemical puppet cores, making the precision and automation far exceed similar products of the time. Through a comprehensive understanding of this information, Hugo had a complete picture of the plan called Starry Sky. He could now confirm that the entire operation was progressing in an orderly manner. In this situation, if nothing changed, Hugo and the others could completely add a trip to the moon to their plans for this summer. Seeing the beautiful universe from another perspective, watching the construction progress step by step was very pleasing, so Hugo and the others chatted more and more happily in the restaurant until the alarm clock reminded them that the Hogsmeade day was over, and they reluctantly returned to the castle. How to stay underwater for an hour? It seems you figured out what the next task is. The next day, after class, Hugo and Hermione were studying various plans for the space station through the Admiral network while chatting with Harry, who had come to them for help. Unlike the original duo of Harry and Ron, Ginny had been joining them when she didn't have class since the Yule Ball, as was the case this afternoon. Your summoning charm in the first task was very good, so I think you can order an underwater breathing tube from the Golden Scales apothecary and just put it in your mouth when you go underwater, Hermione suggested while reading a book. Unlike the first task, the second task allowed participants to bring items other than their wands. Otherwise, Harry would have been eliminated for using gillyweed in the original story. That plan would have worked until noon today, Ginny said, shaking her head helplessly, because Karkaroff specifically stated at noon today that the manufactured items used by participants in the second task must be made by themselves and cannot be purchased. This is specifically targeting Harry and me, Veneto said, poking her head out from behind a book. because a wizard's spellcasting level increases with age, and making magical items and potions requires sufficient accumulation, and this new rule clearly affects us younger ones more. It means that, theoretically, most of the simple methods we could use are restricted. Then what's your plan? Ron asked, puzzled, looking at the calm Hugo and Hermione. You don't seem worried at all. It's enough to simply transform a part of the body and the items you carry, Veneto said, shaking her head, then looking at Harry across from her. But I don't recommend you take the same approach as me, because this method is closely related to a person's magic reserves and spellcasting ability, and you may not be able to master it. For example, the bubble HUD charm. That's true, Harry said, nodding with a wry smile after Veneto finished speaking. The bubble HUD charm is 5th-year material. It's not too difficult to master, but it's not so easy to stay underwater for an hour. Then why don't you try non-manufactured items? At this moment, Luna, who had come to do homework with Hugo and the others, said in a wavering tone. Maybe there's a fruit that you can eat and breathe underwater. Yes, Luna's right. Hearing Luna say this, Hermione looked at Harry. The magical world has so many magical creatures with all sorts of effects. Maybe there really is one that can let you breathe underwater. I've never heard of such a thing existing, but our family isn't very good with herbs either, Ron said, turning to look at Harry. So, mate, you'd better consult Professor Sprout. Maybe she knows of some herbs that are suitable for you. Chapter 357 Game 2. Professor Sprout was a very enthusiastic professor, especially when it came to matters concerning the honor of the school. So, after Harry asked her, she quickly recommended gillyweed to him. I think with this, I'll be able to get through the competition. That afternoon in the library, Harry carefully took out a glass bottle from his robes and said to Hugo and the others inside the glass bottle was a clump of herbs that looked like countless slippery, gray-green rat tails, which was quite unpleasant in appearance. Gillyweed is indeed suitable for the problem you're encountering now. After looking at this messy clump of things, Hermione quickly found the corresponding information from the vast amount of data in the Admiral network. But you'd better learn some combat magic now, because the bottom of the Black Lake isn't a safe place. Competing there will definitely involve fighting a lot of messy things. Do you have any? Never mind, forget I asked. Harry originally wanted to inquire further, but after recalling how Veneto utterly crushed the dragon in the first task, he abandoned the plan because the combat methods for the dangerous aquatic creatures that Lupin mentioned last year that might appear at the bottom of the Black Lake were basically all melee-based. It was estimated that they definitely wouldn't be a match for Veneto, and just like that, a month passed in the blink of an eye, and the time for the second task quickly arrived. The weather on this day wasn't very good. Dark clouds hung low in the sky, especially over the Black Lake, giving people a sense of oppression the night before. While Hugo and the others were reading in the library, a Ravenclaw lower-year student ran over and called Hermione away, obviously for tomorrow's task. I didn't know the Goblet of Fire could screen out the most important person in the contestant's heart, Veneto said to Hugo through the Admiral network while eating breakfast this morning. Fortunately, this screening is based on magic, so I can just hide my true thoughts through the Admiral network and then have your sister take your place. This is also the result of our previous discussion. Hermione believes that is the core of the grand plan. It's obviously inappropriate to put you in avoidable danger. I'm really not that fragile, Hugo said with a wry smile, shaking his head. For the ship girls, the Admiral's safety is naturally the most important thing, so they would naturally stop him in this situation. It doesn't matter. Actually, I think it's quite comfortable staying in the water. Hermione's voice came from the Admiral network at this time. It even feels more comfortable than on land. The only thing that doesn't feel good is that this gillyweed doesn't seem to be of much use to me, but then again, I don't need that kind of potion to survive underwater anymore, but it's quite boring being here alone. The merpeople swimming around me are all ugly. So Veneto, I hope you can get me out of here quickly. Don't worry, I'll definitely be the first to get you out, Veneto said in the Admiral network. Although compared to those destroyers or light cruisers, my ship retrieval skills aren't high, but among the big ships, I'm an excellent ship retriever. Soon, Hugo and Veneto finished breakfast, and then walked together towards the location of the Black Lake. At this time, only about 1/3 of the students had finished breakfast, and they were walking forward along the road in 2s and 3s soon. The two arrived at the competition venue and said goodbye to each other. Veneto went to the tent to prepare for the battle, while Hugo climbed onto the step grandstand by the lake. At this time, there were already many people on the stands. Everyone chatted and discussed the competition events for today. Although it hasn't been officially announced yet, Most people have already guessed that the competition should be held in the Black Lake. The weather is still a bit cold now, so the Weasley twins are running around selling pendants that can warm the body, selling each pendant for 2 sickles on average. Who do you think will win today? Fred bent down and asked as he walked to Hugo's side. We're betting with the Durmstrang students, betting 1 galleon that Miss Veneto will win. Then you'll definitely win the bet, Hugo said with a smile. I can tell you with 100% certainty that, compared to other venues, Veneto has unprecedented advantages in this kind of water event. That's good, George popped out from another place and said. Those Durmstrang students are still saying that Miss Veneto is just strong, and definitely won't be good in the water. By the way, I have a question, Hugo asked after chatting with the twins for a few words. If the competition is really held in the Black Lake, what will we watch for the entire competition? We should only be able to stare at the lake's surface and see nothing. After hearing Hugo's question, the twins looked at each other, and then said hesitantly. After all, others definitely won't be allowed to cast spells in the Black Lake at this time. To be honest, wizards do have some magic that is similar to having a portable camera effect that can see someone's actions, but because this competition involves multiple schools, it is not appropriate to cast this kind of magic. After all, everyone can't pick someone who is generally recognized as fair to cast the magic, and if the principals of each school take the initiative to cast it, it is likely to be considered as helping their own students cheat. That's why in the original text, Headmaster Dumbledore needed to communicate with a merperson leader to know what the contestants were doing below the surface of the water. After all, this is just a competition, and fairness, at least superficial fairness, is very important. However, this doesn't mean that the headmaster didn't do anything, especially since there was Harry, who inexplicably joined the competition. According to Hermione, the entire space around the Black Lake is now chaotic, prohibiting all teleportation at the same time. The various reconnaissance methods that Hugo and the others placed in the secret chamber where the giant tree and the red and white twin dragons were located also told them that the headmaster used the power of Hogwarts Castle, at the cost of weakening the castle itself, to extend magic to the Black Lake. It seems that the boy who lived is absolutely important in Headmaster Dumbledore's heart, otherwise he wouldn't have adopted such a strict defensive tactic, Hugo thought, observing the situation of the Black Lake after the Weasley twins left by about 9 o'clock in the morning. Everyone had basically arrived, and the previous contestants all walked out of the waiting area tents and lined up on the shore of the lake. The 3 headmasters and some staff members then came to everyone's side to give each person pre-match instructions, and then returned to their seats on the main stage. Ludo Bagman said a few words to Harry and squeezed Harry's shoulder hard, before turning back to the judges' table. Then he pointed his wand at his throat and, as he had at the Quidditch World Cup, said, "Sonorous," and his voice boomed across the dark lake to the stands. Well, all our champions are ready to compete. I am about to blow my whistle, and the second task will begin. They have precisely 1 hour to recover what has been taken from them. I shall count to 3. 1, 2, 3. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 358 Simple Match. As Bagman's voice faded, a sharp whistle echoed across the cold, misty lake. Immediately following, cheers and applause erupted from the stands. Hugo saw Harry stuff something into his mouth, chew, and swallow it. Then, he took off his shoes and socks and jumped into the water. Fleur cast a bubble head charm on herself, while Karma attempted a transfiguration spell, but with a slight mishap. Only his head turned into a shark's head, while everyone else was taking action. Veneto stood out, because she wasn't wearing a swimsuit. She was simply walking in the water, rhythmically tapping her calf with her wand. Miss Veneto, the competition has already started, Bagman kindly reminded her, looking at the only one standing in the shallows. Just like the previous events, the competition began with a whistle. Thank you. I was just preparing to cast a spell, Veneto said as she floated up from under the water. Below her knees, she was entirely encased in a pair of metal boots. Our youngest female competitor seems to have conjured some sort of metal item, but I must say, she's currently the fastest, Ludo Bagman announced, his voice drowned out by the cheers from the stands. Everyone watched as Veneto stood on the water's surface, rapidly advancing towards the center of the Black Lake, leaving 2 white trails of water behind her due to her high speed. Almost all the spectators were captivated by Veneto's graceful, figure skating-like progress across the lake, and various exclamations of admiration arose. This is a very impressive transfiguration, although I've never seen a transfiguration turn into a muggle machine. Of course, using the power of such a machine would require a great deal of skill. Ludo attempted to analyze Veneto's situation, but Hugo knew he was purely making things up, because Veneto had only activated a part of her ship equipment. Waving her wand earlier was just a disguise. Moreover, compared to others who could only roughly locate their targets by listening to the Merpeople songs, Veneto could easily and quickly lock onto her destination using Hermione's position. Soon, Veneto arrived above her destination and activated the sonar she had borrowed from a certain destroyer ship girl to start examining the situation beneath the surface. The ship girl's sonar was obviously superior to real sonar. For example, Veneto could not only confirm the number of people underwater and their distribution, but she could even identify them. Among them was a Durmstrang girl, likely Krum's date from before, a little girl she hadn't seen many times, probably Fleur's sister, and then there were Harry's precious Ginny and Veneto's target, Hermione. At the same time, as Veneto activated her sonar, she brought most of the lake bed into her reconnaissance range, and she also figured out what the other competitors were doing. Harry's overall condition was excellent. It seemed he had obtained accurate information from Moaning Myrtle and was swimming directly towards the Merpeople village. However, the competitors from the other two schools were somewhat lacking. Krum's head transformation made him seem top-heavy and also affected his brain. Therefore, his route was winding and crooked, as if he were drunk, while Fleur seemed to be doing okay. She was swimming very close to the lake bed for some reason. Considering that a large group of Grindylows were hiding in the lake bed's weeds, getting too close to the bottom made her very vulnerable to surprise attacks. This is just a competition. There shouldn't be any real danger. Thinking this, Veneto shook her head and dove into the water. If it were anyone else, they might have chosen a showy way to display themselves, but for ship girls, completing the mission with the least amount of energy expenditure was the most important thing. Any unnecessary actions were forbidden. After simply adjusting her weight, Veneto plunged like an iron ingot from the surface directly into the center of the Merpeople village, then looked around. The plaza was surrounded by crude stone dwellings, speckled with algae. Curious faces peered out from the holes in the walls that served as windows. Unlike the beautiful creatures in fairy tales, the Merpeople's skin was iron gray, and their long, seaweed green hair was disheveled. Their eyes were yellow, and their incomplete teeth were also yellow, making them truly unsightly. However, their ugly appearance did not affect their voices. In fact, their voices were the opposite of their appearance. The heavenly singing in the water was being sung by a group of these merpeople. In the plaza behind the Merpeople choir stood a crude statue, a large merperson carved from a giant stone. 4 people were tightly bound to the tail of the merperson statue. Veneto passed the merpeople holding crude short spears and shouting noisily, arrived at the hostages, and directly snapped the tough seaweed rope that bound Hermione. Then, she carried Hermione up to the surface. Throughout the entire process, the merpeople only sang and did not show any hostility. Therefore, Veneto naturally had no excuse to confirm the fighting power of these fish people through combat. After surfacing, Hermione immediately opened her eyes and said through the Admiral network, "It was so boring underwater, good thing you came quickly." At this time, the other competitors were only a few hundred meters away from the shore of the Black Lake. Compared to ship girls, who were naturally suited for underwater activities, even wizards' underwater capabilities seemed pathetic. In 5 minutes, our first champion, Miss Veneto, completed the first task in just 5 minutes, Bagman shouted loudly, but Hugo could hear a hint of listlessness in his voice. Based on past experience, this fellow probably made a fortune during the World Cup and, having tasted success, planned to repeat the trick by betting on an upset, but he didn't expect Veneto to be so strong. However, almost no one in the stands was paying attention to this. The cheers in the stands rose wave upon wave, with the vast majority of the audience shouting Veneto's name. "Well done," Hugo said as he squeezed through the crowd from the stands, then cast a few spells on his sister and Veneto, making them dry and clean. "Of course, you should believe in us." Veneto slightly raised her face, revealing a slightly proud little expression. "There's no way I could lose in this kind of underwater event." Just then, Madame Pomfrey hurried over and made Veneto and Hermione each drink a bottle of potion to ward off the cold, then indicated that they could go into the tent to warm up for a while. However, this request was politely refused by the 2 ladies, who said that they were not cold at all, so they would rather sit outside and chat with friends and see the specific situation of the competition as soon as possible. Chapter 359 End of the game. An hour passed quickly. Except for Veneto, who finished the race in 5 minutes, Everyone else exceeded the time limit. Krum exceeded the limit by the least amount, only 5 minutes. Harry and Fleur both returned together after exceeding the time limit by 10 minutes. Although Harry arrived at the Merpeople village earlier than the other two, he didn't leave until he was sure that everyone had reunited with their hostages. Unlike in the original novel, Fleur was indeed attacked in the weeds. But this time, she successfully got rid of the Grindylows that attacked her, only wasting some time. Obviously, she and Harry both took the Merpeople song seriously. So after landing, she hugged her sister and cried desperately, as if she had recovered some kind of lost treasure. "Do you think I'm stupid?" Harry said to Hugo, who had been waiting here for a long time, after drinking the potion that Madame Pomfrey gave him and wrapping himself in a blanket with Ginny. "This is just a game. I think Veneto and Krum should know this. Only I was stupid enough to take this threat seriously, and as a result, I was the last one to come back. No, I think the choice you made before was very admirable." Hugo shook his head. "At least it shows that you have a strong sense of responsibility, but from another perspective, your habit of getting hot-headed isn't a good idea," Hermione interjected at this time. "If I wanted to deal with you, I could easily trap you by attacking people related to you, or even just making you believe that I attacked people related to you, because when you encounter this kind of problem, you often get hot-headed in the first place, and then ignore all the doubts and rush into the trap yourself." "Okay, it seems I do have some problems in this regard." Harry shook his head helplessly. In his eyes, he always felt that Hermione was like his sister, so he naturally didn't feel so good after being criticized by someone close to him. Fortunately, the goddess of luck didn't completely abandon him. Seeing that he was a little frustrated, Ginny, with her wet hair, reached out and grabbed Harry's head, turning it towards her, and then kissed him directly. At this time, Ron had just squeezed through the crowd and wanted to say something to Harry. When he saw his sister kissing Harry, he was stunned, as if struck by lightning. However, the other spectators in the stands who saw this scene all applauded, and some even whistled. Even the judges who were preparing to score were attracted by the sudden cheers. "This can be said to be a fool's luck," Veneto said, looking at the kissing couple. "Obviously, girls like Ginny, who put Harry first in everything, are the most suitable partners for him." "You're right," Hermione nodded and said, "after all, Harry can be a bit strong at times, and a strong Harry needs a slightly weaker partner in front of him, otherwise they'll definitely argue every day if they're together." Just then, a trace appeared on the surface of the water, and then a merperson floated to the surface. Dumbledore walked to the water's edge and communicated with her using the sharp, piercing sound that merpeople make on the surface of the water. A few minutes later, the two sides ended their exchange, and Dumbledore returned to the judges' table and chatted softly with all the judges. It seemed that they were going to make some adjustments to the scoring. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have finally made a decision. The merperson leader, Mercus, told us everything that happened at the bottom of the lake. We have decided to score the champions as follows, based on a full score of 50 points. Fleur Delacour demonstrated excellent use of the bubble hedge arm, but was attacked by Grindylows when approaching the target, causing her to be the last to reach the destination. So we decided to give her 30 points. There was a burst of applause from the stands, and Fleur nodded in satisfaction. Although she was currently at the bottom of the score, considering her performance just now, Fleur felt that getting such a score could be said to be blessed by Merlin. Victor Krum used transfiguration, although incomplete, it was still very effective. He was the second to return with a hostage, but he exceeded the competition time limit, so we decided to give him 40 points. The applause for Krum was much warmer than for Fleur, mainly because Krum's performance was better. Of course, the fact that he was an internationally renowned Quidditch star also earned him a lot of praise. However, Krum didn't look very good now. After all, he had come to participate in the competition full of confidence, but not only did he not get first place in 2 consecutive competitions, he couldn't even get second place, which obviously made him feel uncomfortable. At least in the speculation of various media about the results of this competition before the start of the competition, most people felt that Krum should be able to obtain an overwhelming advantage, but now it seems that this mainly brought psychological pressure to Krum. Harry Potter correctly chose and took Gillyweed, achieving amazing results. Like Miss Fleur, he was also the last to return. However, the merperson leader told us that Mr. Potter was the first to find the hostage. He failed to return in time because he wanted to ensure that all the hostages could return safely, instead of only caring about his own hostage. Most of the judges, Bagman said, glancing at Karkaroff with great dissatisfaction, think this fully reflects a noble moral character. So, Mr. Potter's score is 42 points, there was another burst of warm cheers from the stands. Amidst the applause and cheers, Bagman's voice sounded again. Finally, Miss Vittorio Veneto showed us a super strong level of transfiguration and flexible use of magic, rescuing the hostage in just 5 minutes, so we decided that Miss Veneto's score is 48 points. I guess it's likely that Karkaroff gave you a low score, Hugo said to Veneto while applauding. Only that guy would close his eyes and give a blind score. Waves of cheers rang out in the stands. After all, Hogwarts was the home team for this competition, so everyone naturally became excited after seeing their school's classmate win first place. The third, and final, task will take place on the evening of June 24th. Bagman continued, the champions will be informed of the specific content of the task 1 month in advance. Thank you all for your support of the champions. It seems that we can rest for a long time next, Veneto said softly, looking at the tranquil black lake and the cheering crowd in the stands. After all, we have a lot of work to do next, so it's good to have some free time, indeed, especially since we happen to have a big project to work on during this time. Hugo nodded. It's a good thing to be able to take enough time to do your own things. Just as everyone was returning to the castle, Hugo saw that the Weasley twins' faces were full of satisfied smiles. Obviously, they had sold things well this time while everyone was bored. I have to say, compared to most of the audience on the field, the Weasley twins gained enough benefits in this competition, earning a lot of money by taking advantage of the extremely boring competition for the audience. Chapter 360 Modified Plan. That evening, Hugo and the shipgirls held a small celebration in the subdimension. Although it was called a celebration, in reality, everyone just wanted to take this opportunity to get together. Currently, many magical creatures have been planted and bred in this subdimension, but considering the importance of this subdimension, this work is the responsibility of several shipgirls in rotation because the climate of this subdimension is completely adjustable. Hugo and the others simply spread out tables and chairs on the lawn in front of Nicholas Flamel's small house to prepare for the banquet since they had to wait for the others to fall asleep before they could come over. When the 5 people from Hogwarts led by Hugo arrived at the venue, the celebration had already begun, although it seemed a little strange to hold a celebration without the main character present. Considering that the shipgirls' goal was for everyone to get together and have fun, it was perfectly normal to do so. Well done, especially winning with such an absolute advantage, St. George said, nodding at Veneto. This fully demonstrates our absolute advantage in matters related to water. Everyone naturally didn't seem too excited. After all, the water was the shipgirls' home field. Winning was normal, and losing would be abnormal. Too much praise at this time would seem like sarcasm. There were several long tables on the scene, filled with various delicacies prepared for the shipgirls. At the end of these long tables was a small dining table, specially prepared for Hugo. For shipgirls, ordinary food can only meet their minimum daily consumption. As long as they use the power of a shipgirl, they must consume the 4 resources. It's just that everyone is usually used to stuffing resources into the ship equipment space, and it's enough to extract them directly when needed. Only when they are free or at gatherings will they take the time to turn these resources into dishes to satisfy their appetites. In fact, Hermione was very uncomfortable with this change in the first few days after being converted, so much so that she needed Veneto to remind her when she woke up hungry in the middle of the night to convert those resources stored in the ship equipment space. However, on the other hand, Hermione is indeed a person who loves to learn, so immediately after the conversion, she used the Admiral network and the shipgirls' unique computing power to learn various knowledge. By the way, did you build a temporary transfer warehouse? Hugo asked curiously, looking at a row of tall buildings surrounded by high walls not far away. I remember that it was just a flat ground last time. Yes, this is the transfer warehouse, mainly responsible for the work of transporting between Earth's synchronous orbit and the future Earth-Moon system, Enterprise said, walking over at this time to answer. Originally, we thought that flat ground would be enough, but later we found that this kind of back-and-forth transportation would scare those magical creatures if there was no concealment, so we adopted this covering plan. That's right. Many magical animals and plants are very sensitive to noise and the environment. Compared to creating completely enclosed breeding and planting institutions, covering the hub is obviously more cost-effective, Hugo said with a satisfied nod, and then looked at the shipgirls. At this time, Hermione was discussing personnel replenishment issues with Salem. Because according to the shipgirls' plan, they would recruit between 1,000 and 3,000 ordinary people every month, so she was a little worried that it would cause unnecessary trouble. Don't worry, we will make full preparations to disguise the people who leave as going on a long trip. Changing jobs? or something like that, Salem explained, and after using magical means to determine that those people are reliable, they can still contact their relatives, and even occasionally go home to visit relatives, so no one will realize that there's anything wrong here. After all, it's not ancient times now. Whether it's changing jobs, moving, or just going out of town for a change of pace, it's all very normal. Few people will think it's strange for neighbors or relatives to leave their hometowns. By the way, I saw in your report that you proposed building some preventive facilities for those space stations. Can you talk about what those facilities are? Hugo asked after tasting some delicacies, mainly divided into two types. One is aimed at meteorites, space debris, and malicious man-made aircraft existing in outer space, including lasers, plasma emitters, and orbital electromagnetic projectors. After hearing Hugo's question, Renown standing next to him immediately explained, the other is aimed at the ground, equipped with return facilities similar to spacecraft return capsules, including personnel and material delivery and bomb delivery. Most of these weapons are conventional weapons, but in each space station, we are also equipped with strategic weapons equivalent to the level of an Ohio-class nuclear submarine, and have corresponding delivery capabilities. Some of these weapons do sound full of science fiction, but the technical content inside is not as high as many people imagine. The main reason why they can't be made is still stuck on the materials with the help of magic. Ubery and Massachusetts and other technicians quickly solved those technical problems, and then made these theoretically very perfect equipment. Well done, Hugo nodded. He knew how much pressure this plan would face once it was exposed, so he would naturally prepare corresponding backhands. And now it seems that the shipgirls have done better in this regard than he imagined. However, I see that you seem to have submitted an application, hoping to slow down the pace of Mars development after the completion of the lunar base construction, and transfer productivity to Earth's orbital space station. Yes, this is the application we submitted, Renown nodded and said, because we believe that ensuring our safety is obviously more important than rapid expansion, so we plan to build 6 more similar armed space stations in addition to the near-Earth orbit space station that has been built and the spare station that is under construction to ensure the safety of our planned operation. According to our plan, we will build a total of 6 space stations scattered around the world, a spare space station, and a more distant command space station to build a near-Earth space station system, so that we can achieve global power projection. It would be better if humans didn't like to kill each other so much. Hugo sighed deeply after obtaining the new construction plan from Renown through the Admiral network. To be honest, if it weren't necessary to defend internally, their construction plan for a permanent base on Mars would have been achieved 4 to 6 months earlier than the current plan. However, Hugo also knew that this kind of defense was necessary. Without this kind of defense, any construction could not guarantee sufficient security. Of course, these space stations are not only for internal defense, Renown explained softly after seeing that Hugo's face was not very good looking. According to our design, the effect of this system is the same for both internal and external. That is to say, in addition to attacking targets on the ground, it can also deflect, guide, or intercept any flying objects in outer space that may cause damage to the Earth. Don't worry, everything you do is right. I'm just a little emotional, Hugo said, shaking his head after Renown finished explaining. I only hope that these things prepared for war will never be used internally. Chapter 361 Rumors and Traces. For quite some time after the second task, countless people came to ask Venetia and Harry about their entire experience during the competition, especially what they encountered below the lake surface, which was the focus of everyone's repeated inquiries. Unlike the Dragon Challenge before, everyone could only brave the cold February wind on the stands to admire the beautiful lake scenery of the Scottish Highlands, except for a few contestants going into the water and running out of the water either with hostages or alone. They didn't see any of the competition process. Venetia was a bit better off, as she spent most of her time with Hugo and the others in the library, perfectly avoiding those curious classmates. After all, Mrs. Pants's feathered duster didn't care about competitions or anything else, but Harry couldn't avoid some trouble. For several days in a row, Hugo saw people constantly pulling Harry aside to ask him questions. What's even more interesting is that Ginny and Ron had a little friction during these few days because Ron felt that Ginny, who was chosen as a hostage, represented his years of friendship with Harry, which couldn't compare to Ginny's half-year acquaintance. So, when he was resting in the common room one time, he casually complained that Harry valued girls over friends, which Ginny happened to hear and directly retorted. Faced with his furious sister, Ron could only repeatedly apologize for his rash words. I really don't know what I did wrong. I just complained a bit, and she said that to me," Ron said to the twins during dinner. Fortunately, although the Weasley twins hadn't found girlfriends yet, their understanding of women was far better than their younger brothers. So, they took the opportunity during breakfast to give the brother a lesson. However, for Ron, this wasn't the worst thing happening right now. In the new issue of Witch Weekly, Rita Skeeter once again displayed her fabrication skills, making up Harry's love life. It seems Rita Skeeter is spreading rumors again. On the third morning after the competition, Hugo noticed many people holding a booklet and muttering something. After borrowing it to take a look, he found that it was another fabricated fake news story. Harry Potter's love history. He may be an extraordinary boy, but he is also experiencing everything that a young boy in his youth experiences, such as love problems. On the first day of entering Hogwarts, encountered the love of his life, Ron Weasley. Ron Weasley had eaten, slept, and stayed inseparable with Harry Potter for 3 years, establishing a deep relationship, but this relationship couldn't satisfy Harry's appetite. After the Yule Ball, Harry had another companion, Ginny Weasley, the sister of his former partner, Ron Weasley. Because of Harry's fickleness, Ron said that his sister had a fierce quarrel. However, as Harry's new love, Miss Weasley obviously has an overwhelming advantage over her brother, Harry's old flame. Although Harry has many titles, it is not easy to win the favor of both Weasley siblings, especially since Harry doesn't have much to commend him besides his titles. Harry has always had a habit of breaking rules, a student who wished to remain anonymous revealed. So he may have used some kind of rule-breaking method to achieve what he has now. At Hogwarts, illegal potions such as love potions are naturally prohibited. And Albus Dumbledore undoubtedly needs to investigate this matter carefully. At the same time, people who have good wishes for Harry Potter hope that next time he looks for a partner, he should use more legal methods. How did Harry offend Rita Skeeter? Hugo asked the Weasley twins during lunch break that day. Why does Rita describe him as a criminal, even a pervert? I know this, Fred said. Last time I remember when we went to Hogsmeade, Harry seemed to have had a fight with Rita. I guess Rita is using this to retaliate against Harry now, and I think this might be because Rita thinks that everyone is tired of portraying Harry as a tragic hero all the time, George said thoughtfully as he put down the potion bottle in his hand. So, portraying Harry as a villain like now is obviously more attractive to readers than those old styles, although under normal circumstances, any journalist with a bit of moral bottom line wouldn't do this, but Rita Skeeter's record in this regard makes it hard to believe that she has a moral bottom line. That's right, Fred added. Last year, she did an issue about the Ministry of Magic, and she actually said that my father's department was slow to react and accused my father of being a salary thief. This is indeed something that anyone with a mouth can make up, Hugo sighed. Theoretically, Mr. Weasley's department should have 3 people, but now there are only 2, not to mention that one of them is an old man who is obviously lacking in energy. In this case, it is normal for Mr. Weasley's office to be inefficient. In fact, it is already remarkable that Mr. Weasley can finish the work when one person is doing the work of 3. This article spread like wildfire in the school. Hugo even heard that Professor Snape specifically took out this article to mock Harry during his potions class. However, the only good thing is that because this story is so fake, most of the students in Hogwarts don't think that what Rita Skeeter said is true. Even the Slytherins, who took every opportunity to provoke Harry with the content in the books, could have it seen on their faces that they did not trust every word Rita Skeeter said. Something interesting is happening here. Hugo received a notification from Firefly through the Admiral network just as the last class ended that day. Karkaroff came to Snape in class today. Obviously, our raid in Albania did not affect that noseless guy's actions. He is now likely to have obtained a body through Peter and is pushing forward his plan for rebirth. Then have our old Riddle's old observation equipment found anything unusual? Hugo asked seriously. For example, is that guy hiding inside? It can be confirmed that there is nothing. Whether it is the Riddle house or the cemetery there, no unexpected situation has been found. Simai's voice came from the Admiral network. However, we can confirm through some clues that the noseless guy is indeed trying to resurrect, but because almost all of our main force is now focused on the voyage adventure currently known as the Starry Sky Project, we can't spare manpower to track him. For the time being, there is no need to allocate more resources to track him. Compared to the Starry Sky Project, that noseless guy is not a very important issue. Hugo knew that for the ship girls, they could analyze all kinds of things by collecting and sorting out various information, but this work would require a huge amount of calculation. So, given that there are more important things now, Hugo doesn't plan to let the ship girls spend too much time tracking Voldemort. Chapter 362 Hogsmeade Day. After entering the final potions class of the week on Friday, Hugo, Veneto, and his sister passed through the school gates early Saturday morning, a Hogsmeade weekend. As they stepped outside, the pale, weak sun illuminated the grounds. The weather was the warmest it had been all year, the long, harsh winter had finally passed, and spring had arrived. Due to the change in climate, Veneto and Hermione were finally able to shed their somewhat bulky winter clothes and don more figure-flattering everyday attire. In reality, ship girls could venture out in summer clothing even during heavy winter snow. However, to avoid standing out too much, they usually wore clothes similar to those around them, concealing their figures completely. So, with the weather warming up, Hermione and Veneto immediately changed into their ship gear, freeing themselves from their oversized bread loaf appearance. Upon arriving on the streets of Hogsmeade, Hugo noticed that the shops seemed to have awakened from hibernation, all displaying an eagerness to do brisk business. Whether it was Gladrig's Wizard War, Honeyduk's Sweet Shop, or Zonko's Joke Shop, large stacks of packing boxes were piled up in front of their entrances, filled with either newly purchased merchandise ready for display or various decorations to adorn the shops. Even the three broomsticks, which usually didn't have to worry about foot traffic, had clearly been tidied up, with various decorative trinkets placed around it. And on the small building above the bar, the only thing that hadn't changed was the Hogshead Inn. This bar had remained virtually unchanged since its opening decades ago, with only the ever-thickening layers of grime attesting to the passage of time. After all, this was the first Hogsmeade weekend after Christmas, so for most of the shops selling spring goods, it was an opportunity to make a killing indeed. Even Hugo, who didn't usually buy much, felt the urge to shop and spent money on several interesting items. "Let's not go antagonize them today," Veneto said, stuffing a new type of chocolate into her ship gear storage after leaving Honeyduk's, "since there's nothing important happening today, and they're currently building the space transfer magic circle that can connect to the Sky Asynchronous Orbit space station. Our presence might affect them." The space transfer magic circle that Veneto mentioned was one of the ancillary projects that began with the construction of the space station. According to the plan, such space transfer devices would be established in all the places where these ship girls were located to facilitate transportation. Although the subdimension seems sturdy enough now, and with you around, we won't get lost when apparating, we still need to prepare some transportation channels for ordinary people, Hermione added through the Admiral network. After entering space, the ship girls discovered that Hugo was like a dazzling lighthouse in the Admiral network, helping them to locate themselves in space. However, for the humans they recruited, who lacked special positioning, they needed other means of travel. Although, according to the current pace of the plan, the users of these magic circles might only be the ship girls for the majority of the time, it's always better to prepare something in advance than not at all. "So, where shall we go next?" Hugo asked the two ladies, realizing that they couldn't go to the store to cause trouble. "It's too early to return to the castle now, but we can't just stand around in the street. I think it would be better to go to the Three Broomsticks. There are more people there, and we might hear some interesting news," Hermione suggested after thinking for a moment. "Besides, the drinks at the Three Broomsticks are really good." 5 minutes later, Hugo and his two companions appeared on the seats of the Three Broomsticks pub, each with a steaming mug of butterbeer and a small plate of snacks in front of them. The Three Broomsticks pub was as crowded as ever, with students wandering around taking advantage of the Hogsmeade weekend, as well as many outside patrons and even wizarding parents trying to meet their children for ship girls. This kind of chaotic situation was a good opportunity to gather information, because most people wouldn't realize that someone could analyze the conversations of several people at once through lip reading in this dimly lit room. However, most of the information gathered was ordinary everyday chatter, and not of much value. But occasionally, there would be some very interesting tidbits. "Penelope seems to be sitting alone at a table over there, crying," Hermione suddenly said as they were chatting and drinking butterbeer. Because Penelope, as a prefect and head girl, had always taken care of the younger students, Hugo and the others finished their butterbeer and went over to see what was wrong. Perhaps because she had been somewhat traumatized before, Penelope quickly revealed why she was crying alone after being greeted. The reason was simple: she and Percy had broken up. Or, to be precise, she had originally planned to meet Percy today, but instead received a breakup letter from the pub owner announcing their separation. Although the reason for the breakup in the letter was high-sounding, the gist was that the two of them were no longer in the same place. It was difficult to communicate regularly, so it was better to break up directly than to drag it on. But in reality, this was just an excuse. The real reason for their breakup was because Penelope was just a Muggle-born witch, so not only could she not help Percy in his career, but she might even hold him back. In fact, Penelope had already noticed something was wrong during the summer vacation this year. For example, he had only written a few letters during the entire summer, and most of each letter was about his work at the Ministry of Magic. Fortunately, the Weasley family's upbringing was strict enough, so Percy didn't do anything like having an affair, but after working for a while, he realized that the original choice was not in his favor and directly wrote a letter to end the relationship. "This is the biggest flaw of us Muggle-born witches," Veneto said, gently patting Penelope's shoulder in comfort. "Compared to those pure-blood wizards, we only have ourselves in the wizarding world." Obviously, Penelope also knew these things. Although the Weasley family had always seemed a bit down on their luck, as pure-bloods, they could always obtain a place for themselves in the Ministry of Magic if they wanted to. Those half-blood wizards were a bit worse off, but after entering the Ministry of Magic, they could always find ways to get some help from their elders and thus get opportunities for promotion. Muggle-born wizards were mostly at the bottom of this pyramid, doing the most work and often taking the blame. But their promotion speed was far slower than the previous two groups. Although there have been Muggle-born ministers for magic in history, that's like the Black President of the United States. It didn't change the overall racial discrimination tendency of society. Perhaps everyone didn't realize this in school, but after entering society, this would immediately affect everyone and make everyone make their own choices. Chapter 363 Pre-match preparation. So, in the time that followed, Hugo and the others began to comfort Penelope. To be honest, Penelope was simply unlucky to be one of the countless Muggle-born witches suffering from the unfairness of the wizarding world. The current situation was indeed partly due to Percy's overly utilitarian nature, but it was also inseparable from the long-standing discrimination in the wizarding world. Anyone who can become head boy or girl is smart enough, so with Hermione and Veneto's explanation, she quickly agreed with the ship girl's point of view and was successfully recruited by them. "What kind of sweet talk did you two use just now?" Hugo asked the two ladies beside him as they returned to the castle. "A head girl like Penelope is basically welcome wherever she goes, so except for a few people, like you who must not be named back then, she basically wouldn't work in any store. We wouldn't deceive in this kind of matter. The other party's willingness to choose this path can only be their own idea, not from our rhetoric, tricks, or other similar things," Hermione said, shaking her head. "If it were last year, even a few days ago, she wouldn't have had this idea, but the letter Percy gave her is enough to make her think about the current situation in the world, and as long as she is willing to think, she will find that our views are correct," Veneto added from the side. "Then it's not surprising to choose to stand with us at this time, because, relative to the current situation of the entire world, the plan we propose, although the most difficult to implement, is also the easiest to solve the existing problems. And can solve the existing problems from the root." "That's right. You're absolutely right," Hugo thought for a moment after hearing the two ladies' words, and then nodded quite seriously. In his opinion, an organization formed based on the same concept is obviously much stronger than an organization gathered together for other reasons. In the following period of time, everything seemed very calm. The only slightly unexpected thing was that Harry, Ron, and Ginny received many unfriendly letters from the outside world. These letters were all related to Rita Skeeter's article last time. Obviously, the wizards in the wizarding world have a very low level of discernment for a fake news, and coupled with the wizarding world itself being too boring, such things will happen. However, because the bubba that came with the letters injured several people, in order to avoid embarrassment in front of teachers and students from other schools, Professor Dumbledore specially ordered the house elves to inspect the letters. As time passed, the weather became hotter day by day. Usually, the beginning of the summer term meant that Veneto and her Quidditch teammates needed to step up training to prepare for the final Quidditch match of the season. However, because the Quidditch game was cancelled this year, Veneto had more time to spend with her Admiral, which also made her feel a lot better. Time flew by, and it was the last week of May. Veneto received a note from Professor Flitwick. "Please go to the Quidditch pitch at 9 o'clock tonight. Mr. Bagman will be there to announce what the fourth task is." So, at 8:30 that night, Veneto said goodbye to Hugo and Hermione in the Ravenclaw Tower's common room, and then walked down the stairs. In the hall, she met Harry, who was coming down from the Gryffindor Tower not far away. "What do you think it will be?" Harry asked Veneto as they walked down the stone steps together, merging into the cloudy night. "I heard Krum muttering about underground tunnels in the library. He thinks we're going to be looking for treasure." "I don't think that's very likely," Veneto said. shaking her head. Haven't you read Hogwarts, a history? Because Hogwarts is by the water, the groundwater level in the entire area is very high. If you dig tunnels, everyone will easily be soaked in water together. Considering the amount of work involved, I guess there might be tunnels in the final task, but it would be too expensive to dig tunnels on a large scale and cast spells. I don't think everyone would be willing to do that. It's definitely a good thing to not have to dig tunnels. After hearing Veneto say this, Harry looked much more relaxed. Obviously, competing in a dark place like the Black Lake before had caused him a lot of psychological shadow. They walked along the dark lawn towards the Quidditch pitch, and then entered the pitch through a crack in the stands. However, as soon as he walked into the pitch, Harry stopped and said angrily, "What have they done here?" The Quidditch pitch was no longer flat and smooth. It looked as if someone had built countless long, low walls here, and these low walls were intricate and winding in all directions. "This looks like a maze." Veneto squatted down and then observed the nearest section of the low wall, and found that this section of the low wall was composed of a kind of magic-resistant shrub. "Hello!" A cheerful voice shouted. Ludo Bagman was standing in the center of the pitch, with Krum and Fleur beside him. Seeing this, Veneto and Harry crossed the low walls and walked towards them. As Harry approached, Fleur gave him a bright smile. Since Harry rescued her sister from the lake, her attitude towards him had changed 180 degrees. It seems that Harry is obviously much more gentlemanly than before, Hugo muttered softly, watching everything on the field through the Admiral network. Because at this time Harry also bowed to Fleur with a smile. "I have to say that being in love does help people grow in some ways." At least Hugo can say with 100% certainty that Harry would never have responded like this before being with Ginny. "So, what do you think?" Bagman asked cheerfully as Veneto and Harry climbed over the last hedge. "Good progress, isn't it? In another month, Hagrid will turn them into 20 feet high, but don't worry." He saw the unhappy expression on Harry's face and said with a smile, "Your Quidditch pitch will be restored as soon as the Triwizard tournament is over. Okay, I think you can probably guess what we're going to do here, right? A maze." As soon as Ludo Bagman's voice fell, Veneto, Harry, and Krum said in unison, "That's right," Bagman said, "it's a maze. The final task is very simple and clear. The Triwizard Cup is in the center of the maze. Whichever champion touches it first will be the final champion. Moreover, this year's competition is different from previous years. The Golden Hogsmeade grocer and its Lighthouse radio station have paid to sponsor this competition, so this time, in addition to the champion, other people can also get 1,000, 500, and 300 galleons in prize money according to their ranking, so they don't have to go home empty-handed. We just have to get through the maze." Fleur asked. "There will be many obstacles," Bagman said cheerfully, hopping up and down. "Hagrid has provided a lot of animals, and some spells that must be undone, things like that, you know. Also, the champion with the most points goes into the maze first." Chapter 364 Accident. According to the rules, Miss Veneto enters the maze first, followed by Mr. Potter, Miss Delacour, and Mr. Krum. Bagman said with a smile on the seemingly chaotic Quidditch field, "This is the final match, and you all must work hard to succeed. It all depends on your ability to overcome obstacles. It should be fun, right?" Veneto nodded along with the crowd at this time, but her heart was full of the urge to complain. Veneto knew all too well what kind of animals Hagrid would provide on this occasion, and it was not fun at all. Although these monsters' combat power was very average to her, the disgusting feeling they gave people made her feel a little uncomfortable in her heart. "Very good. If you have no questions, let's go back to the castle, shall we? It's a bit cold here." After explaining everything, Bagman hurriedly walked beside Harry, wanting to chat with him, but at this moment, Fleur stepped forward and gently patted Harry's shoulder to help him out of the situation. "Harry, after you saved Gabrielle last time, she has been nagging me about wanting to meet you, so I hope you can go to the Booksbritton's carriage and talk to her." Harry naturally couldn't refuse this invitation, so he said goodbye to Veneto and followed Fleur towards the Booksbritton's carriage near the Forbidden Forest. As expected, Harry is a sucker for looks. Hugo shook his head and muttered in the common room. Watching Harry walk towards the Forbidden Forest with Fleur through the Admiral network, he guessed that if it were Krum or Bagman who invited Harry, Harry would definitely not be so excited because of Veneto's return. Hugo and Hermione also came out of the common room to welcome her and to pick up a few books from the library. Soon, the two sides met on the third floor and then walked towards the library along a passage. "What's going on with Harry?" Just as the three of them came out of the library, they found Harry and Fleur leaving the Booksburton's carriage and heading towards the Forbidden Forest. Harry should have a girlfriend now. Seeing this scene, Hugo pointed to the group of people below and said with a smile, "What if we tell Ginny about this? Then Harry is definitely doomed." Hermione laughed beside him. "And I think I should tell Ginny too. After all, Ginny and I are considered friends." Emergency. Just as Hugo and the others were joking around, they suddenly received a notification in the Admiral network from Renown, who was stationed at the Sky One space station. An anomaly has occurred at the Little Hangleton graveyard. Someone used a disillusionment charm or an invisibility cloak to dig up Voldemort's grave and take something from it. What? Hearing the news from Renown, Hugo and the others all became vigilant. This was because, according to their prior analysis, Voldemort's rebirth potion should have limitations on the freshness of the ingredients. Otherwise, in the original story, Voldemort could have completely used Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Moody, to obtain Harry's blood, revive himself first, and then summon the Death Eaters to perform killing Harry. Of course, the shelf life of different raw materials should be different. For example, whether it is fresh blood or flesh, it is naturally better to be fresh, otherwise, even with magic, it will lose its activity over time. But ashes are better than the previous two. Digging them out a few hours or even days in advance will not affect the essence of the object. So they can be prepared in advance. And after learning the alchemy knowledge left by Nicholas Flamel, Hugo also discovered that the procedure of brewing the potion in the original text, that is, bone, flesh, blood, also increases in activity in turn, which just shows the characteristics of resurrection from death. But no matter what, it is better to have the raw materials of the potion as fresh as possible. And now, someone suddenly took the ashes, which is very likely to mean that Voldemort is preparing to resurrect. Have you tracked the other party's whereabouts yet? Because the Sky Space Station is equipped with a large number of detection-related equipment, and the space station is now targeting Britain. The two directly asked Renown about the current situation. "Sorry, not yet." Renown's slightly nervous voice came from the Admiral network. "Because the other party apparated and ran away after digging up the grave, I can only conduct a comprehensive scan of the British Isles now." Damn it, Harry is in danger now. Before Renown could finish speaking, Veneto suddenly reacted and ran downstairs. Seeing this, Hugo and Hermione followed behind him. "I remembered, that Fleur just now was fake." While running, Veneto said to the Granger siblings through the Admiral network. "Because that Fleur's attractiveness today is much less than usual." The attractiveness is much less, Hugo thought for a moment, and then said in a somewhat uncertain tone. "Do you mean that she didn't release that Vela-specific natural magic today?" "Yes, although under normal circumstances, Velas can control the release of their unique charm. There will always be a little magic leaking out during one-on-one communication with Harry before, but now I realize that Fleur didn't have any magic outflow at all when she was talking to Harry just now, which is obviously not normal, considering the information Renown conveyed, plus the two people walking towards the Forbidden Forest. I think that Fleur is very likely to be a spy who has sneaked in disguise." "That's right." Hermione's face also showed a nervous expression, especially since the anti-apparition charm in Hogwarts Castle only covers the grounds and does not cover the Forbidden Forest. It's not enough just us. When he reached the stairwell, Hugo looked at his sister. "Sis, you go and notify the headmaster first. We may have a lot of things to deal with next." "Understood. I'll go find the professors now." Hermione nodded vigorously and ran towards the headmaster's office upstairs to report the news. Hugo and Veneto quickly used a rope to come to the ground directly from the wall of the castle, and then rushed towards the place where Harry and the fake Fleur had just left. The range of the anti-apparition charm in the castle decreases from the court to the periphery, which means that although apparition is possible on the edge of the Forbidden Forest, it is estimated that you have to go deeper into the Forbidden Forest to ensure safety if you want to apparate with someone, which means we have enough time to act now. Looking at the map of the range that Veneto and Firefly had spent a lot of time testing out of the Hogwarts anti-apparition charm in his mind, Hugo showed a serious expression. Although he didn't know how this fake Fleur tricked Harry into the Forbidden Forest, at the beginning, the other party at most used inducement instead of a coercive means. Otherwise Harry would have been heard by the people in the carriage. As long as he struggled, this naturally left Hugo with valuable rescue time. Now the only unknown is whether they can intercept them in time before Harry is taken away. After all, Harry and the fake Fleur had already entered the jungle for a while when Hugo and the others realized something was wrong. So whether the other party is still in progress or has already left is temporarily unknown. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, It means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 365 Fighting. After quickly descending the ropes hanging on the castle wall to the lawn in front of the castle, Hugo and Veneto ran quickly towards the place where Harry had just left. In a short 10 seconds, they quickly crossed the lawn outside the main entrance of the castle and entered the Forbidden Forest, and with extraordinary hearing, Veneto quickly found the target. The other party hasn't left yet, but is already close to the edge of the castle's defensive magic radiation. Veneto's voice quickly rang in the Admiral's network. We can only pray that the other party hasn't precisely tested the radiation range of the defensive magic in the castle like we have. So we might have a chance to catch up with the other party before they escape. Hopefully, we'll be lucky enough. Hugo quickly crossed a few tree roots and avoided a branch, then tightened his grip on the wand in his hand. After chasing forward for 3 or 4 minutes, Hugo and Veneto saw the two people walking in front of them through the bushes. At this time, they had completely left the radiation range of the castle's anti-apparition magic. Looks like I've been discovered. At this moment, the fake flower in front suddenly drew out her wand, stunned Harry with a stupefy, and then shot a killing curse directly at Hugo. Seeing this, Veneto had to give up the plan to attack, and then quickly approached Hugo. After all, for a ship girl, protecting the Admiral is a principle engraved in the soul, and nothing has a higher priority than this. Fire a red spark, Hugo said to Veneto, who summoned a bulletproof steel armor plate, and then together with Veneto, they held up the steel plate and rushed towards the opponent while casting spells. The fake fleur obviously didn't have a good way to deal with a steel plate with a thickness of more than 300 millimeters, so she could only drag Harry back while releasing magic after magic. However, these magics couldn't even stop Hugo and Veneto's footsteps, and could only watch Hugo and Veneto approach step by step. For Hugo and Veneto, as long as they could interfere with the other party's ability to use apparition, it would be enough. After all, Veneto had just released a red spark representing distress, and reinforcements would arrive soon. Just as Hugo and the other two came to tree root, the fake Fleur showed a crazy smile on her face that would never appear on the real Fleur's face. At this moment, Hugo suddenly felt a strong suction coming from under his feet, and at the same time, it seemed as if a hook was fiercely hooking forward behind his navel with an irresistible momentum. Damn it! At this moment, Hugo immediately realized that this guy had just released a spell to cover up the fact that he had released a portkey-making spell, and then lured them into this trap by retreating. What was used as a trap was a section of tree root lying on the ground, occupying a large area. If you didn't know in advance, it would be easy to step on it directly on the other side. Veneto was obviously also tricked, but unlike Hugo's slightly slow movements, Veneto gently waved her left hand before being teleported away, hitting Harry, who was being held in the fake Fleur's hand, with a ship girl's unique magic. Fortunately, it's still in time. After using the portkey to send Hugo and Veneto away, the fake Fleur glanced at the red spark that Veneto had shot into the sky just now, and then parried it away with Harry. It seems we're one step late. Not long after everyone had left, Professor McGonagall arrived in the woods with Moody. Damn it, this is a conspiracy. Looking at the chaotic situation at the scene, Moody frowned, then walked into the field and began to cast spells to find clues. Minerva, when will Headmaster Dumbledore be back? While casting a spell, Moody asked Deputy Headmistress McGonagall. This is not an ordinary kidnapping case, I know, but Headmaster Dumbledore and Madame Maxime are not at school tonight. One went to Egypt and the other went to Russia for the magical creatures needed for the third game, and they can't return in a short time. Damn it. This must be a premeditated attack. Hearing that the two headmasters were not there today, Moody cursed in a low voice. As an experienced Auror, he realized that something was wrong as soon as he arrived at the scene. Ever since Harry was inexplicably chosen as a champion, I felt something was wrong. Now I want to see who is behind the scenes and what tricks they are playing. Unfortunately, because of the short but intense battle that had just taken place here, there were not many traces left at the scene. Moody used several detection-specific spells before determining that 3 people had fought here and then disappeared together. Based on the current information, the Fleur is most likely fake, so they chose today, when both headmasters are away, to try to lead Harry away, but were accidentally discovered by Miss Veneto and Mr. Granger. After completing the on-site survey, Moody, with a grim face, straightened up while holding his wand, and then said to Professor McGonagall, who was nervously waiting for an answer, The person disguised as Fleur is very powerful, and has continuously cast multiple dark magic spells, including the Killing Curse, in an attempt to attack Veneto and the others. But they were all blocked by Veneto and the others with some kind of heavy protective barrier, so in the end, this disguised dark wizard could only secretly turn a small thing into a trigger-type portkey to teleport the two students away, and then operate away with Harry himself. Oh my god. This is simply, after listening to Professor Moody's analysis, Professor McGonagall covered her heart with her hand and exclaimed softly, "I hope they are alright." At this moment, with a crisp cracking sound, Enterprise, with a somewhat ugly face, appeared next to Professor McGonagall and Moody. She first made a prearranged gesture to Moody to confirm her identity, and then looked at Professor McGonagall and said, "Something big happened on the Booksburton side. The real Fleur was attacked and hidden in the dormitory after dinner tonight. It wasn't until I went over that they discovered that Fleur was in a comatose state and was hidden in the closet in her room. It's been several hours since dinner. Didn't anyone notice this?" Moody said with wide eyes. "I remember Booksburton's method of managing students is more like managing beaters, with roll calls several times every morning and evening, because Fleur, as a champion in this competition, has a single dormitory, and usually no one except Madame Maxime can enter, so when they found that Fleur didn't come during the roll call, the prefect in charge of affairs temporarily went to inquire, and as a result, they heard Fleur say through the door that she was not feeling well and wanted to rest for a while before coming back, just like I said. Dark wizards will launch sneak attacks at any time." After listening to Enterprise's words, Moody sighed. "That is to say, the person who is playing tricks before has been disguised as Fleur all along, right? This is the worst news I have to say today." Enterprise pursed her lips, and then said, "The other party should have disguised themselves as that prefect, and only seized the opportunity today to launch a sneak attack and swap with Fleur, and then disguise the prefect's body as resting on the bed." Chapter 366. Something happened. "Are you saying, you found the body of a Booksburton's head girl?" Professor McGonagall's eyes widened, and she asked in a slightly trembling tone as a wizard who had personally experienced the last war. Professor McGonagall was no stranger to death, but as a professor, she couldn't accept the death of a student, especially now that Hogwarts was hosting the most important competition in Europe, the Triwizard Tournament. The death of a guest from another school would have a very negative impact on the school. Yes, and the entire body was subjected to some kind of preservation charm. Enterprise nodded. "Although I can't determine the exact date of death, judging from various clues, he most likely died within 5 hours. According to Enterprise's analysis, it was likely that their actions in Albania during the summer had stirred up trouble, forcing Voldemort to adopt this more covert method of infiltrating Hogwarts, and the practice of killing the person they were replacing before taking action was also a standard dark wizard tactic. Minimizing the leakage of their own information, I can also basically confirm that the piece of paper Harry had was thrown into the goblet of fire by this person." After explaining the matter of the body, Enterprise also analyzed the reason why Harry was entered into the tournament. "I think the slip of paper thrown into the goblet of fire by this attacker, who was disguised as a Booksburton student at the time, probably had Harry's name on it, and then they cast a confundus charm on the goblet of fire. After all, there were no professors present in the hall when the Booksburton students were voting, so it wouldn't have been too difficult to cast such a charm under the cover of their robes. That guy has been lurking under our noses for more than a semester without being discovered. It seems I'm really getting old." After listening to Enterprise's analysis, Moody wiped his face with his hand. "But before I completely retire, I swear I will bring that guy to justice. Otherwise, I might feel guilty for the rest of my life." "Alright, I'll contact Headmaster Dumbledore and Madame Maxime now and have them come over as soon as possible." Professor McGonagall regained her usual composure at this moment and began to give instructions. "Professor Moody, please check here for traces of spellcasting to see if you can find any clues about the attacker's weaknesses. Professor Halsey, you'd better go and comfort the Booksburton students." Just as the Hogwarts professors began to mobilize and prepare to organize a rescue, Harry was waking up from his coma, only to find himself tied to a tree in a seaside forest. What exactly happened? Harry, feeling a splitting headache, looked around, only to see a large pot with a fire burning underneath it in the open space not far away. Fortunately, the headache wasn't permanent. Soon, he felt the pain lessening, and he was finally able to properly recall what had happened before. After inspecting the venue, Fleur had invited Harry to sit in the Booksburton's carriage and tell her sister some of his stories. At first, Harry didn't plan to sit with Fleur because he still harbored some feelings that it wasn't appropriate to get too close to a competitor, but in the end, he couldn't resist the beauty's request and followed her. However, Harry wasn't able to tell his little admirer his heroic stories, because he had just said goodbye to the others and walked to the edge of the Forbidden Forest when he was controlled by the Imperious Curse. Although the real Moody had cast the Imperious Curse on everyone this year with permission, as an Auror, he naturally couldn't be as unscrupulous as a dark wizard, nor did he make Harry his main target, so Harry's ability to resist the Imperious Curse wasn't as strong as he thought, and coupled with the fact that the cross-dressing big shot disguised as Fleur was also exceptionally powerful, Harry was directly hit, almost got discovered by those two mudbloods at the last step. Not far from Harry, a silver-haired girl cursed as she took off the women's robes she was wearing, but this has also given me an opportunity to kill those few mudbloods who have tarnished the glory of purebloods, and let all mudbloods know that they are not worthy to touch the power of magic. After taking off the clothes, she grabbed her hair with both hands and yanked off a hood from her head, revealing an ordinary-looking face. If Hugo and the others were here, they would recognize that this person should be a spokesperson's girl, whose figure and height were relatively close to Fleur's. Damn half-bloods, defiling the wizarding bloodline. After tearing off the hood and taking a deep breath, the witch revealed a look of disdain. Obviously, Polyjuice Potion can only be used for transforming pure humans, and wizards like Fleur who have other biological bloodlines cannot be transformed with Polyjuice Potion in a few minutes. The effect of the Polyjuice Potion ended. A man with pale skin, slight freckles, and messy light yellow hair, somewhere between middle-aged and young, stood there bare-chested. If Professor Dumbledore or some older wizards were here, they would recognize that this person was Barty Crouch Jr., who had attacked the Longbottoms and was sent to Azkaban by his own father. Huff, huff, Barty Crouch Jr. panted heavily. The intense battle just now, coupled with a parading with someone, had taken a toll on him, especially for someone like him who had been imprisoned at home for a long time and whose body was very weak. Even if he had recuperated a bit recently with the help of disguise, such strenuous activity still made him feel somewhat overwhelmed. However, a smile that would make people feel a little terrified appeared on his face, because he had successfully kidnapped Harry under the heavy surveillance of the Ministry of Magic and Dumbledore, and even better, in addition to completing the scheduled task perfectly, he also managed to take away two mudbloods who had tainted the purebloods' honor with their dirty hands, giving mudbloods the Order of Merlin, and even choosing mudbloods as champions. It seems this society has fallen. Thinking of this, he shook his head, shaking off this unpleasant fact, and his loyalty to his master increased a bit. Thanks to his master's wise planning, he was able to complete this seemingly impossible task. Just as he was thinking this, his eyes suddenly froze, and then an excited look appeared in his eyes. Although it was already dark, Barty Crouch Jr. saw a short figure walking step by step out of the darkness, wearing a hooded cloak that covered his face. He was holding his master, who was temporarily in an infant state, in his arms. As he approached, Barty Crouch Jr. found that his master was looking at him with an approving gaze. This made him feel extremely excited, as if a warm current flowed through his whole body, because that lord had actually come to pick him up in person, an honor that almost no one else had ever received. The moment he saw his master, Barty Crouch Jr. felt an unprecedented sense of excitement in his heart, and the fatigue on his body was swept away. Chapter 367 Ceremony. Master, I have delivered Harry Potter into your hands, Barty Crouch Jr. said in a tone mixed with humility and fanaticism, bending his back so hard he looked like a shrimp. Looking at the expression on his face, one could tell that if Voldemort were standing there instead of being held, he would have rushed forward without hesitation to kiss Voldemort's feet. Very good. You will receive a reward beyond your imagination, a reward greater than that of all my servants, the snake-faced infant hissed, sounding just like a snake. Take me over there, let me see our guest. Barty Crouch Jr. took the infant Voldemort without hesitation. Just then, a gust of wind blew, knocking off the small wizard's hood and revealing a wretched face. Whether it was the power of fate or not, Peter indeed reunited with Voldemort after successfully escaping. Even though Voldemort, after being attacked by Hugo and the others, wasn't in Albania as in the original story, they still gathered together, and after they gathered together, Peter, with nowhere else to escape, reaffirmed his loyalty to his old master. The moment he confirmed Voldemort's presence, the bundle containing Voldemort was held up by Barty Crouch Jr. in front of Harry, and then a hissing sound came from inside the bundle. What a wonderful prey this is. We've been preparing for him for more than half a year. Fortunately, we timed our raid well and unexpectedly captured the target smoothly, Voldemort said with emotion. Suddenly, Voldemort's voice turned cold. "Now, what are you still waiting for here?" Upon hearing this, Peter quickly scurried away, and soon pushed out a small cart from behind a small mound. On it were 5 or 6 cauldrons, seemingly filled to the brim. When moved, the sound of liquid splashing inside could be heard. After pushing the small cart to the side of the large cauldron, Wormtail used his wand to tap and draw on the bottom of the stone cauldron. Suddenly, crackling flames sprang up under the cauldron. Seeing the flames emerge from the bottom of the pot, Peter immediately took out the small pots one by one from the small cart and poured the potions from the small pots into the large pot in order. Barty Crouch Jr., on the other hand, cast spells on the potions according to Voldemort's instructions. Soon, all the potions from the small pots were poured into the large pot. These expensive potions mixed together in the large pot and, after being boiled, became as clear and transparent as water in just a few minutes. This rare and expensive potion was quickly brought to boil with the help of the flames. Its surface jumped wildly, even occasionally splashing out sparks, as if it were burning. "Very good," Voldemort nodded with satisfaction. If this pot of potion were ruined, even Voldemort himself would need at least 3 months to make another pot, not to mention the time spent collecting the ingredients beforehand. As the potion in the pot simmered, the surrounding steam became thicker and thicker, and even Wormtail's figure, tending to the flames, became blurred. That sharp, cold voice came again from the mist. "Now, quickly," with a solemn expression, Barty Crouch Jr. carefully unwrapped the swaddling clothes in his hands like a sacred object, revealing a monster with dark red skin, without a single hair, deformed limbs, and a flat snake face with red eyes. However, Barty Crouch Jr. did not show a trace of disgust. He gently held the monster as if he were holding the most precious treasure in the world, then lifted the creature up and steadily placed it into the boiling and sparking cauldron. Voldemort's resurrection show is about to begin. To be precise, this is not resurrection. Resurrection does not exist in this Harry Potter world. Only those high magic worlds can possibly give birth to this completely heaven-defying skill. What Voldemort is doing now is not so much resurrection as it is recreating a physical body for his weak and fragmented soul. After all, Voldemort, who made Horcruxes, did not die, so naturally, he cannot be resurrected. The 2 Voldemort lackeys present showed a look of surprise, because even the acknowledged greatest white wizard, Dumbledore, had no way to resurrect the dead, and even felt regret and guilt for a lifetime for the death of his sister. Under such circumstances, the scene of Voldemort's resurrection from the dead naturally made these 2 Death Eaters incomparably worshipful. For example, at this time, Peter was already so excited that he could hardly stand still. However, Barty Crouch Jr., who was in charge of the ritual, was much more reliable than the original Peter. At least his hand didn't shake when he picked up a ceramic jar from the ground next to him. He tapped the mouth of the jar with his wand. "Father's bone, unknowingly donated, will make your son reborn." It seems that Voldemort dug up his father's grave, but this will not bring him any psychological pressure. Compared to killing his father's family with his own hands, digging a grave is really nothing. As he chanted, a small wisp of dust flew out of the jar and gently fell into the cauldron. The diamond-like surface of the liquid cracked, hissed, and sparked, and the liquid turned into a bright blue, giving people the feeling that this liquid was definitely highly poisonous. After using it, Barty Crouch Jr. carefully put the jar away. Of course, this was not out of respect for Voldemort's Muggle father, but because this ingredient of the potion, Father's Bone, was limited in case Voldemort needs to do this again next time. This thing can be used again. Anyway, not much bone ash is used for 1 potion, and the amount left in the jar is estimated to be enough for Voldemort to use 10 or 8 times more. After checking that this step was correct, Barty Crouch Jr. rolled up his sleeves without hesitation and stretched his hand above the cauldron. Then he said in a firm tone, "Servant's flesh, voluntarily donated, will make your master reborn." Then, with the other hand, he pulled out a dagger from his leg and slashed down fiercely, and a lot of blood gushed out from the break. But Barty Crouch Jr.'s face did not show the slightest pain, but rather a martyr's ecstasy as he watched his arm fall into the pot. The blue potion turned fiery red, and at the same time emitted a strong light outward. Peter Pettigrew's mind had been completely conquered by the scene. He knelt down in front of the pot, muttering something in his mouth. Barty Crouch Jr. first sealed the wound on his arm with a spell, then he took the dagger and the crystal bottle and approached Harry. Just as he walked in front of Harry and was about to strike, he suddenly heard Peter's exclamation. The exclamation was so loud that Barty Crouch Jr., who was holding the knife and the crystal bottle, shook his hand directly, almost cutting a slit on his own hand. It turned out that at this time a meteor appeared in the sky, and then fell towards their location with an indomitable momentum, even with a sound like thunder. "Shut up," looking at Peter, who stood up and exclaimed like a groundhog. Barty Crouch Jr.'s face showed an angry expression. Then he raised the knife and slashed at Harry's arm. "Blood of the enemy, forcibly given, will make your enemy reborn," Barty Crouch Jr. said in a fanatical tone. Harry struggled desperately, but he was tied too tightly. So he could only watch helplessly as the tip of the dagger pierced into his arm, and blood flowed down along the torn sleeve and into the crystal bottle. At this moment, the meteor fell into the sea less than 50 meters away from them, making a huge roar. At the same time, a burst of hot water vapor spewed out, wrapping the entire scene in a cloud of mist. Barty Crouch Jr. did not panic at this time, but quickly walked to the cauldron with a bottle in his hand, and then poured the blood from the bottle into it. As Harry's blood flowed into the pot, the flickering flame immediately lit up. The cauldron was about to boil, and diamond-like sparks splashed around, bright and dazzling, making everything around it turn into a black velvet color. Seeing this scene, Barty Crouch Jr.'s eyes showed an excited light, but at that moment, a silver-white light rushed out of the fog and shot towards the cauldron. Chapter 368 Hugo and Chapter X27, S Action. In this drama of Voldemort's resurrection, Hugo and Veneto were also caught up, not just Harry. Although they had prepared their defenses during the battle, they really didn't expect the enemy to use this method to break through their defenses. Just as the portkey activated, Hugo immediately prepared for battle, activating the runic inscriptions on his body to put an extra layer of defense on himself. Then Hugo felt as if a hook behind his navel was pulling him forward with an irresistible force, and his feet lifted off the ground. They actually have this kind of tactic. Hugo felt a little dazed, because neither he nor the ship girls had encountered this tactic before. So he was naturally a little flustered when he encountered it for the first time. A very clever approach. Veneto had already analyzed the advantages of this tactic at this time. The enemy must have seen through our intention to stall for time, so they used this method to drive us away in order to escape with Harry. Veneto sent information through the Admiral network while holding Hugo's hand tightly. Their shoulders bumped together from time to time, and the wind whistled in their ears, as if they were flying at high speed. Finally, their feet landed on the ground, and then Veneto gently nudged Hugo's shoulder from behind to help him stand up straight. "Where's this?" Hugo looked around and asked with a puzzled expression. He found himself in a cellar, with only a wooden fence overhead allowing him to see the stars. However, judging from the solid stones, walls, and ground around him, as well as the bloodstains left around, this place seemed to be a prison for detaining prisoners. "This area is a chaotic magic zone." Veneto waved her wand and said, "Generally, those who build bases of this kind in this place are non-wizard magical creatures, because this place can suppress the spellcasting abilities of wizards to the greatest extent possible, but it will not overly affect those creatures that rely on bloodline magic to fight." Hugo nodded in agreement, because he also took out his wand and tried to cast a spell. Only to find that casting spells in this place was much more difficult than casting spells in other places. "How did you guys run so far at once?" Just as Veneto and Hugo both adopted combat stances, Renown's voice came from the Admiral network. "You were just in Scotland, but now you're actually in Bavaria." "Don't mention it. I accidentally got hit during the battle just now, and I was directly sent away by the other party's portkey," Hugo said to Renown helplessly. "By the way, can you see our current location accurately?" "You are currently located in a valley." Renown on the space station quickly adjusted the reconnaissance equipment to project onto Hugo's location, and then said, "There are traces of a lot of personnel activity around. If I'm not mistaken, you should now be in a settlement of traditional hags, and these hags are often supporters of dark wizards and are not friendly to ordinary humans or wizards. Look at this." While Hugo was contacting Renown, Veneto was constantly searching for clues with the tools in her hand, and she actually found something in Veneto's hand. Was a piece of clothing remnant, which looked like it should be a relatively new windbreaker, and there was a patch of blood on the edge of the windbreaker, indicating that the owner of the clothes was likely in mortal danger. Hags are creatures that look very much like ugly old witches and have disgusting warts all over their faces. They also use some relatively simple magic derived from their bloodline. According to the Ministry of Magic's classification, hags are classified as humans, which made centaurs and mermaids very unhappy, preferring to be classified as beasts rather than being in the same category as hags. The reason why centaurs and mermaids were unhappy was because hags originally had an evil side to their nature, such as using intelligent creatures as their food and maliciously spreading diseases in the 17th and 18th centuries. A hag named Honoria founded the Hag Reform Association to help and guide hags to live more civilized lives in the magical world. Because of this, most hags have now integrated into human wizarding society. For example, they can be seen in Diagon Alley, Nocturne Alley, and Hogsmeade Village. However, not all hags have embraced civilized society. Some hags still continue their past lives. They still live in caves and hunt humans to make their own potions. Yes, hags can make some potions that wizards cannot make, and some of these potions use human organs, so now only those wild hags living in caves can make them. Of course, this practice is against the law, and aurors will also hunt down those hags who dare to do this and imprison them permanently or execute them directly. It's just that because many of these potions are either unattainable or difficult to obtain by human wizards' potions, the black market for potions has always existed. During the last war, many wild hags sided with Voldemort because Voldemort promised to allow them to use muggles to make potions. However, after Voldemort's defeat, these hags were naturally liquidated. Many of the ringleaders were killed or arrested by aurors, but a small number escaped, and judging from the current situation, the location where Hugo and the others are located is likely to be a secret base of a certain wild hag faction. Obviously, Barty Crouch Jr. and the others are likely to have some kind of connection with this hag village. Considering the pot of potion when Voldemort was resurrected, it is entirely understandable that the other party has some connection with these hags. And Barty Crouch Jr. teleporting Hugo and the others here is obviously hoping to use a knife to kill. Does the other party really think that this broken place can hold us? Veneto unfolded her ship equipment at this time, then grabbed the wall of the cave and quickly climbed to the top of the well prison, then pinched the wooden fence above with her hand and opened a hole to drill out. After confirming safety, Hugo also climbed up. It may be because the other party felt that this area was safe enough, so there was not even a sentry around. This place sounds quite quiet. It doesn't seem like anyone is nearby. After hiding behind a large rock and listening for more than 10 seconds, Veneto quickly heard some information. I think someone is coming. I'll grab a live one and ask. Hugo nodded, then took out a short sword and a pistol engraved with runes from a secret space agency in his robe, and then leaned against the stone nervously with a vigilant look. However, Veneto is indeed very reliable when she really enters combat mode. Soon, she dragged the hag back after setting up a simple magic barrier around. Veneto began the interrogation work. The work was a bit unsuccessful at the beginning, but after connecting with Dzerzhinsky, the interrogation progress quickly improved. After all, hags are still humanoid creatures, so under those tried and tested torture methods, they are no stronger than ordinary people. Soon, Hugo and the others asked some key information. Chapter 369 Identify your opponent. According to the interrogation, these hags were part of the escaped remnants from the First Wizarding War. However, after surviving, they didn't reform but rebuilt their village in this place. According to the captured prisoner, more than half a year ago, some dark wizards found them and ordered a large batch of potions, and the rewards they paid included money, as well as people who were occasionally kidnapped. Most of the victims were ordinary people who couldn't use magic, but occasionally there were also some squibs or wizards who had clearly been subjected to powerful magical interrogation and couldn't even remember who they were. It seems that the noseless guy has indeed done a lot of things during this time. After listening to the interrogation, Hugo nodded with a serious face. Especially the kidnapping of people without others noticing is definitely not normal. In addition, the most important information they obtained was that this place was not a gathering place for hags. Although aerial reconnaissance made it look like a settlement, it was actually just a cover, or rather, they deliberately built this place into this appearance. This way, when the aurors and others were attracted by the false target, these hags could take the opportunity to escape. Sorry, the observation equipment has not been fully built yet. After receiving the interrogation results, Renown said through the Admiral network. So, with just optical facilities, it's easy to make misjudgments. It's nothing, it's not your fault, Hugo said, looking at Veneto, who summoned a bowl of water on the side and calmly washed her hands. After all, the construction of the space station has not yet been completed, and various facilities are not perfect. It's normal to have various flaws. It must be said that the ship girls are more skilled than humans in some aspects, such as the current interrogation of this hag. When normal people torture prisoners, they are either excited, nervous, or perverted, but none of them can compare to Veneto's calm expression before, as precise as a machine when applying torture, which is so terrifying. This situation is not because the ship girls themselves are perverted, but because for the ship girls, only their companions and Admiral are their own people. and the rest are no different from chickens, ducks, cattle, and sheep. It seems we are going to face a fierce battle next, after completing the interrogation. The expression on Venato's face was not very good, because the number of enemies far exceeded her previous imagination. Because this place is the largest illegal hag gathering point in Western Europe, there are probably more than 30 hags in total, so it naturally has strong defenses. Venato wasn't worried about facing so many enemies, but she was a little worried that she wouldn't be able to 100% guarantee the safety of her admiral when facing so many enemies. "Why don't we come back after a while?" Venato whispered to Hugo. "There are too many enemies here. It's difficult for me to guarantee your safety after the war breaks out. Don't underestimate me." Although I haven't reached Dumbledore's level yet, after integrating the runic knowledge from Odin last time, I can at least be on par with Snape or Professor McGonagall in terms of combat power. Hugo was quite happy about Venato's concern, but through long-term practice, he understood that his current strength was not weak, and he was not lacking in actual combat ability. So he was fully qualified to participate in actual combat. Indeed, he is not a match for the ship girls in daily battles, but considering that the ship girls are serious about this aspect, the fact that he can fight back and forth with the ship girls overall is already very telling. More importantly, as the saying goes, it's better to be stolen from than to be targeted by a thief. We have already formed a grudge with this group of wild hags this time, so if we don't settle it once and for all, future problems will be even more troublesome. Looking at the hag lying on the ground, covered in wounds and already dead, Hugo knew that this was no longer a simple problem that could be solved, so taking the initiative to attack became the only option at this time under normal circumstances. Reporting to the local Ministry of Magic is also an option, but considering the fact that this group of people has been active in the entire region for more than 20 years, Hugo and the ship girls felt that it would be better to use the weapons in their hands to get justice, just like a certain great man in the East once said. The weapon of criticism can never replace the criticism of weapons. Especially since the group of guys we encountered now probably only understand the language of violence. Reinforcements will arrive soon. At this time, Renown, who is in charge of commanding at the space station, said to Hugo and the others in the Admiral network, "Next, we will clean up the entire demon cave. Please hurry up," Hugo said vigilantly, staring at his surroundings. The other party also knows that their behavior will not be understood by the wizards, so if the captured hag doesn't return within 20 minutes, the other party may transfer their destination. The main reason why this hag camp has not been discovered is that they have obtained the protection of some pure-blood wizards. And the entire settlement is designed to be very hidden. You must know that the wizards in the magical world still have very obvious racial tendencies. They may accept individual hags attacking ordinary people, but they will never allow these hags to attack the wizards themselves, and these hags were also very cautious before. They hid their settlements from the wizards and completely concealed their behavior of kidnapping wizards, so they were able to survive until today. Don't worry, these guys will definitely not escape. After listening to Hugo's slightly anxious words, Renown assured, "The mobile unit of Sky 1 space station has set off and will arrive at your location in 5 minutes. In fact, the actual waiting time was not even 5 minutes. After about 4.5 minutes, Venato suddenly raised her head and looked at the sky, and Hugo, who was connected to her through the Admiral network, also noticed that something invisible seemed to be falling from the sky soon. An aircraft covered with a layer of invisible runic symbols emerged from the air. Then, the hatch of the aircraft opened, and the Iowa sisters jumped out. Very good technology. Looking at the aircraft, which unloaded personnel and then re-emerged into the thin air and climbed towards the sky, Hugo nodded. Obviously, combining current human technology, magic, and ship girl technology, the ship girls now possess the most advanced technology in the world. For example, the aircraft that can directly break through the atmosphere from Earth's orbit to transport personnel to the ground and then return to the space station on its own is the crystallization of these technologies. Soon, Hugo and the others put on dark blue robes embroidered with anchor emblems and put on golden masks, and then moved towards the place that had been interrogated from the hag's mouth. Unlike what they imagined, the place where these hags were hiding was not far from this fake settlement. The other party obviously didn't want the two places to be too far apart, in case something unexpected happened on the way. When Hugo and the others quickly bypassed a nearby hill, they saw the faint firelight from the depths of the cave in the distance. Chapter 370 Raid. Big head weirdo, what are you dawdling about for? Don't tell me you're planning to hog all the good stuff again. Just as Hugo and his group were quietly approaching the cave entrance, the grating voice of an old woman echoed from within. Before she could finish her sentence, a beam of light struck the ground at her feet, followed by a massive stone hand rising from the earth, seizing her tightly in its grasp simultaneously. As this attack succeeded, a cat covered in what appeared to be sores was attempting to slip away, only to be struck by a magical blast that glued it to the wall, where it was then completely enveloped by the animated stone. They're holding a gathering today, and even the mother of hags will be present. Veneto nodded slightly. Watching the cat on the wall repeatedly attempt to revert to human form, only to be forced back by the magic. So, the cave entrance that usually has 3 guards now only has 2, and most of the perimeter warning devices have been deactivated to avoid accidental triggers. Looks like our luck isn't bad. Hugo sheathed the short sword in his hand, which was covered in runes. It was thanks to this that they were able to launch this surprise attack before the hags could react. After confirming the sentries were eliminated, Wisconsin and Missouri pulled out 2 tri-bladed spikes crafted by Unyielding and inserted them into the temples of the 2 hags, then began extracting information from their minds. These tri-bladed spikes were among the latest black magic items created by Unyielding, featuring runes derived from the Imperius and Legilimens spells, with a hollow core filled with Veritaserum as a new form of interrogation tool. These tri-bladed spikes possessed unprecedented reliability, capable of extracting information from most intelligent beings, with very few exceptions. The cost, however, was that the interrogated subject almost certainly wouldn't survive, and only ship girls could wield this tool and extract the desired information from the flood of memories. After all, the principle behind this device was to extract and rapidly copy all the memories of the interrogated subject, and the human brain simply couldn't withstand the influx of a lifetime's worth of memories in such a short time. Successful elimination. We haven't been detected by those inside yet. However, the magical defense system here conducts a full sweep of the castle every hour, and there are 38 minutes until the next sweep. Missouri, accessing the results of the interrogation through the Admiral network, quickly relayed the information she had obtained. There are currently 35 hags inside, plus the mother of hags, making a total of 36. The most troublesome issue now is that these hags are located in a magically fortified cave over 1,000 meters underground, and that cave only has one large main entrance for us to enter and exit. The rest are just fist-sized holes. How cunning, Hugo muttered softly after hearing Missouri's report. He realized the advantages of setting up a base like this. For the hags, such a sturdy base with only one large entrance was very advantageous for defense, while the surrounding interconnected small tunnels also allowed them to quickly escape when facing enemies they couldn't defeat. You see, one of the bloodline magics possessed by hags is a spell that allows them to transform into animals, which almost everyone knows. And they can completely turn into small animals like rats or raccoon dogs and escape through the small holes. According to the information collected by the ship girls from those pure blood families, human wizards' animagus transformation was likely created with reference to these hags' magic. Therefore, animagus transformation differs from most magic, such as not requiring a wand when used, and needing to use potions to assist when learning the spell. However, this also gives the current group of hags a base that is both offensively and defensively advantageous. It's difficult for outsiders to wipe them out in one fell swoop. It's not like there's no solution now. In fact, you could say that the fact that they built a cave so solidly actually makes our actions easier. At this point, Iowa turned to look at Hugo. However, I need the key. Okay, but only one. After being reminded by Iowa, Hugo immediately knew what she was talking about, but for safety reasons, he only authorized the use of one Mk-23 shell. After all, the explosive yield of this shell is between 15,000 tons of TNT and 20,000 tons of TNT. If too many were used at once, Hugo was worried that it might cause some geological disasters. After determining the specific situation, Hugo and the others immediately began assigning tasks. Hugo and Veneto would stay at the base's only large entrance, while the 4 Iowa sisters would go deep underground to place the Mk-23. In order to achieve the goal of blasting the group of creatures underground, they had to go deep underground to reach the base's central hub and maximize the defensive magic, so as to concentrate the explosive power and reduce external impact. Hugo naturally knew that forcing himself to go down would only add to everyone's troubles and would not have any positive effect, so he and Veneto took on the task of defense. This didn't mean they could just stand at the entrance and do nothing. While Missouri and the others took out brooms from their ship equipment space and flew down the tunnel, Hugo also took out a pile of rune stones from his body and began setting them up. These rune stones were magical tools that Hugo had prepared in advance, capable of forming a defensive line with considerable lethality. If anything really ran out, they could at least block it, even if they couldn't win. Although, theoretically speaking, Even a normal wizard would probably not be able to withstand a nuclear bomb with a yield of more than 10,000 tons of TNT head-on. But considering that the magical world has too many strange things, there's nothing wrong with being prepared. While Hugo was setting up various defensive lines at the entrance, Missouri and the others went down the tunnel. On the way, they encountered many vampire bats, which were obviously domesticated. You see, the magic mastered by creatures like hags is significantly inferior to that of wizards in terms of both breadth and depth, but compared to other non-human magical creatures, their mastery of magical knowledge can be said to be the most advanced. For example, Missouri and the others encountered a large group of vampire bats trained by the hags that were very sensitive. If they weren't mistaken, these vampire bats would not only attack anyone who passed by, but also provide warnings to the hags hiding in the base. But ship girls are the natural nemesis of these things, because these vampire bats rely on smell and temperature to determine the presence of nearby creatures. And ship girls can completely make themselves as lifeless as inanimate objects. Therefore, when these ship girls quickly flew through the bat swarm, it was no different from a gust of wind passing by for the bats, so they didn't react at all. In addition to vampire bats, everyone also saw many dangerous creatures along the way, such as poisonous insects and rats the size of lambs. Accelerate forward, ignore these things. After taking out an alchemical tool made by unyielding from her pocket, Iowa, who was leading the way, quickly notified her 3 younger sisters through the Admiral network. These things don't pose much of a threat to us, so just rush straight down and don't get entangled with them. Chapter 371 Near. As Lamias who mastered magical creature breeding and some special magic, their first line of defense was these dangerous magical creatures, which not only served as an early warning system, but also sounded the alarm in case of an attack. Besides, perhaps because they were better at utilizing flesh and blood, these Lamias spells also tended to be related to flesh and blood magic. These spells were not only used to cultivate vampire bats or some dangerous poisonous insects, but also for reconnaissance. As a result, because these Lamias never imagined that there would be non-flesh and blood creatures in the world, these very ingenious settings were basically ineffective when facing ship girls who were non-flesh and blood life forms. In this situation, the Missouri and her sisters quickly moved down the tunnels and cracks inside the mountain as if entering an uninhabited land, towards the Lamia base hidden in the cave. As the altitude decreased, the surrounding temperature began to rise, and the previous poisonous insects and bats gradually disappeared. Just when the temperature had exceeded 60 degrees Celsius, and the oxygen content in the air had dropped to less than 1/5 of the ground level, the brooch pinned to Missouri's chest lit up. Magic cannot be cast in this place. The warning magic of those Lamias in this place will sound an alarm as soon as it detects a magic reaction, Missouri said through the Admiral network after taking a look at the brooch. This high temperature, oxygen-deficient environment was obviously not something that humans could withstand with their own bodies, and using magic would trigger traps. For the Lamias, this was a foolproof defense facility. However, for the ship girls, this place was even easier to pass through than before. Because unlike the tunnels and mountain cracks densely packed with various creatures just now, there were no creatures in this area, allowing the ship girls to move forward at full speed. Finally, after 7 minutes, the ship girls flew to a fork in the road. According to the memory obtained from the Lamia's mind before, these 2 roads respectively connected the magic control center of the entire base and the cave hall where the Mother Lamia was located. Whoosh, bang! Just after the 4 ship girls turned a corner, a short spear flew straight out of Missouri's hand, directly pinning a large bat the length of a human arm to the wall. This kind of short spear, made with the mithril from the fairy race added to the head of the spear made by 8-eyed giant spiders, coupled with the power of the ship girls, became an extremely terrifying kinetic weapon. Therefore, after the big bat was hit by this, it only struggled a few times before stopping moving, and then it reverted to its original Lamia form. It seems that those Lamias have focused their attention on the Mother Lamia. Missouri nodded in satisfaction after confirming that there were no other living things around. The reason why she launched an attack before was because the previous memory clearly marked that there would be 1 or 2 Lamias transformed into animals stationed in this place, so after sensing the existence of living things, she launched an attack at the first time. New Jersey, Wisconsin, the 2 of you go up this way to control the magic hub of the entire cave. Iowa and I will now go to the entrance of that large cave hall to prepare for an attack. Missouri quickly assigned tasks, and then everyone immediately split into 2 groups and acted. After watching New Jersey and her sister leave along an upward cave entrance, Iowa and Missouri proceeded along that large passage towards the target cave hall. The next journey was unexpectedly smooth. After all, the cave hall ahead was a very sacred place for the Lamias, and it was located extremely deep underground, so naturally, there would not be too many people on the road at this time. There were indeed some dangerous alchemical traps and alchemical alarm devices, but the ship girls could completely figure out how to use these devices through the Admiral network and use the equipment in their construction space to crack these traps. The main reason why the ship girls were able to infiltrate such a critical place so easily was that the group of Lamias failed to imagine that there could be creatures like ship girls in the world, whose survival habits were completely different from humans, of course, from another perspective. This secret base located in a complex mountain not only had a large number of defense facilities, but also countless forks in the road in the middle, making it indeed difficult for outsiders to find the target in the first place. If the ship girls hadn't used special means to read the memories of those Lamias all the way, they would not have been able to rush straight to the target without taking any detours like they were now. Even in the section of the cave 200 meters away from the target, Missouri and her sister didn't even feel the existence of any traps or detection equipment. Instead, the walls on both sides and the top of the cave were covered with a thick layer of gold leaf and inlaid with a large number of gemstones, decorating the entire cave in a magnificent manner. At the beginning, Iowa and Missouri thought that this place was using various gold and gems as a cover for setting up certain traps, but the inspection results showed that there was nothing here. Come to think of it, even normal people don't like to install surveillance cameras or traps in their own homes. The Lamias were the same. They didn't want to install too many of these types of magic arrays in their residences. It wasn't until the end of this road, in front of a golden gate, that 2 Lamias with 4 behemoths were stationed in this place, and extremely sensitive warning spells were cast on them. Next, it depends on New Jersey and her sister. After reaching the last corner less than 20 meters away from the last door, Missouri quickly loaded an Mk-23 onto her shipborne artillery, and then waited with Iowa for the other party's actions. Just as Missouri and her sister arrived at their positions, New Jersey and her sister also came to the side of the core magic array and began to study it, and 5 or 6 meters away from them, 2 Lamias were nailed to the wall by 2 javelins. Good news, Missouri. After using the Admiral network to connect to Indomitable and check the entire magic array, Wisconsin called Missouri and her sister through the Admiral network. This group of Lamias obviously has deep collusion with certain pure-blood families, because we found that this entire defense system is very similar to the defense system of those pure-blood families. That is to say, that giant cave hall below can temporarily enter the subdimension in an emergency, but unlike the core secret rooms of those pure-blood family manors, that cave hall can only enter the subdimension for 1 minute. The magic of wizards is naturally not limited to those small magics. Some large-scale war magics are specifically used to attack buildings or certain fortified areas. For example, in the original Hogwarts battle, Voldemort's side used this type of magic to open the magical defenses of Hogwarts Castle when facing flexible and changeable attackers. The defenders naturally developed a series of defensive measures. In addition to hard defenses similar to magical shields, wizards also developed soft defenses that focused on evasion. The space transfer magic that the ship girls have now discovered is one of them. For those wizards, allowing the building to move and enter another space when the enemy launches an irresistible attack is obviously the culmination of this type of defense system thinking. But this approach is also excellent news for the ship girls, because they don't need to worry about how troublesome it would be to deal with a big commotion caused by the explosion of the Mk-23 shells. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 372 Attack. Count down 5 numbers, then start the action. Without Indomitable's guidance through the Admiral's network, Wisconsin and New Jersey quickly figured out how to use the core magic circle. Then, while manipulating the magic circle according to Indomitable's instructions, they coordinated with all the action personnel through the Admiral's network and prepared to attack. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, start. As Wisconsin's last word fell, she and New Jersey simultaneously activated the magic circle according to the method they had previously figured out. In an instant, a surge of magic power flowed from their hands into the magic circle, and then the defensive magic on the door of the hall dozens of meters below disappeared. Boom. At this moment, Missouri, who was already prepared, suddenly kicked off the ground and jumped out of the corner with her ship gear activated, while simultaneously firing shells at the Golden Gate. Compared to the ship girls who cooperated seamlessly through the Admiral's network, the reaction of the Night Hag was obviously more than a beat slower. By the time the shells roared and smashed open the gate, Flying into the hall, the night hag guarding the door had just turned her head at the instant the shells flew into the hall. The two ship girls in the control room immediately switched their manipulation of magic power and activated the final defensive magic, teleporting the entire hall to a subdimension after a ripple like water waves. The magnificent hall that had been visible through the broken gate disappeared, leaving only a dark hole. Kill them quickly. Although they couldn't figure out what had happened for a moment, the two night hags guarding the cave entrance immediately charged towards Missouri along with the four ogres Missouri and Iowa. At this time, each took out a short spear from their ship gear space and threw it fiercely at the two night hags flying over on broomsticks, then took out their M2s and strafed the short spears made of fairy silver and injected with the venom of the eight-eyed giant spider. Had a powerful killing effect on magical creatures, including wizards, so these two night hags were undoubtedly sent flying more than 10 meters away and nailed to the ground. Then, bullets flew from the machine gun's muzzle and landed on the four charging ogres. The kinetic energy of these large caliber bullets was so great that it even made them jump off the ground. Combat over, prepare to retreat and avoid the heat. After confirming that the last ogre in the corridor was dead, Missouri raised a fist to signal a ceasefire, and then entered her own subdimension according to the original plan. Although the ship girls didn't have to worry about the shells causing large-scale geological disasters in the area because of the space transfer magic circle, it was still better to avoid the high temperature left after the explosion returned. It seems that weapons of the level of nuclear bombs can also cause a considerable degree of damage to magic. After waiting for 5 minutes in the subdimension, Missouri suddenly said before leaving, she had placed many items for reconnaissance in the corridor, and found that in just 5 minutes, an extremely high temperature surged out of the previous cave according to what New Jersey and the others said before. Although activating it once would drain all the magic power in the magic circle, the level of the final defensive magic as a trump card was not bad, of course. This was much worse than the genuine magic used by pure blood families, which could last for an hour, but theoretically, it should be able to last for half an hour. But according to the current situation, the magic that was theoretically able to last for half an hour had now completely failed after only 5 minutes. There is nothing wrong with the thing itself, Indomitable's voice came through the Admiral's network. It's just that the energy impact brought about by the nuclear explosion has a stronger impact on magic than we initially imagined. I think that's quite reasonable, Hugo said through the Admiral's network. Don't forget, we all know that dense magic can affect electronic instruments, so the reverse effect should also exist. Hugo had thought about this aspect before. He believed that this kind of interference between energies should be mutual, that is to say, magic and the power mastered by ordinary people can interfere with each other. However, relative to the characteristics of magic, there is very little energy in the ordinary human world that is powerful enough to change magic. Therefore, there is basically no interference of ordinary human world energy on magic. But now, after a round of nuclear strikes, Hugo and the others observed for the first time the obvious influence of the power mastered by ordinary people in this world on magic. Unfortunately, this observation result will not be of corresponding use for a while. After all, today it was only by chance that the use of Mk-23 shells did not affect the external environment, but on most battlefields they cannot do this. This does not mean that this discovery is without any value. At least after confirming that the core principle of this world is energy rather than anything else, they will always find a way to develop equipment suitable for manufacturing based on this principle in the future. Alright, we should go out and take a look. After confirming that the situation outside had stabilized, Missouri and the others quickly left the subdimension and came to the cave they had just been in, only to see a scene like purgatory. The magnificent cave that had been seen after the gate was smashed had completely disappeared, and everything inside was in a special reddish-red molten state. The energy generated after the explosion of a 15,000-ton nuclear weapon was released all at once in a small space, resulting in extremely terrifying effects. Although so many night hags gathered together were a very threatening target even to wizards, and also had a lot of defense, they almost all perished in this attack. The reason for saying almost is because just before the ship girls came out, a black shadow rushed out of the gate that looked like purgatory, and then quickly flew along the passage towards the ground. Obviously, the existence known as the Mother of Night Hags was much stronger than the other night hags, and could even use some means to leave her body and act in the state of a soul. You guys go and scout the cave just now. Leave the things here to us. After listening to the ship girl's report, Hugo immediately issued an order, and then activated the magic circle that had just been set up. The power from those ancient runes was immediately activated, and a force was ready to be released throughout the cave entrance. And not long after this force was activated, A black shadow rushed up from the cave below. This black shadow looked a bit like the gas form Voldemort from the first grade, but her luck was obviously not as good as Voldemort's in the first grade. Just as this cloud of black shadow was about to rush out of the cave entrance, a large net composed of blue and white electric currents directly enveloped it, and then completely wrapped the cloud of black mist. The black mist seemed to want to struggle, but the large net composed of surrounding electric currents quickly emitted a large amount of electric current, illuminating the entire black gas, and causing the mist to emit a sharp sound like fingernails scraping a blackboard. Chapter 373 Victory. It seems these runic spells are indeed useful. Hugo smiled as he watched the shadowy figure completely controlled by the electric current he was manipulating. However, he knew that this was only a stalemate for now, so he took out a large handful of rune-inscribed stones from his pocket and threw them at the grayish-black mist. The moment the rune stones touched the mist, countless electric sparks burst out, forming an electric dragon that tied like a blood cocoon, emitting a sizzling sound at the point of contact. Amidst the piercing sound, strands of black mist separated from the main body of the mist, attempting to neutralize the blue-white electric dragon. This did work to some extent, as the blue electric dragon gradually dimmed as it was neutralized by the mist, but the cost was a significant consumption of the mist itself as strands of black mist and blue-white electricity turned into nothingness. The originally jet black mist began to fade, gradually revealing a hunched, human-like figure in the middle. Realizing that electricity was indeed the opponent's bane, Hugo threw out another handful of rune stones. But just as these stones touched the mist suddenly expanded. Seeing this, Hugo and Veneto immediately retreated behind a nearby rock, while Veneto summoned a piece of her armor plate to block in front of them. Just as they barely prepared themselves, the mist exploded with a bang, and grayish-black mist shot out in all directions like sharp arrows, creating a series of clanging sounds around them. This mist seemed to have obvious corrosive properties. The things hit by the mist, whether stone or metal, had grooves on them, looking as if some acid had dripped on them. Along with this venomous mist, a stream of grayish-black smoke flew straight towards Hugo and slammed into the shield that Veneto was holding up in front of him. Seeing this, Veneto immediately conjured a rapier glowing faintly red in her hand, and thrust it out the moment the armor plate was retracted. But when the sword struck the mist, Veneto felt as if her sword had only passed through a puff of air. Fortunately, the sword was imbued with the power of slaughter and destruction after being drawn, causing some damage to the mist and making it scream again. At the same time, Veneto conjured a ball of golden red flame in her other hand and slammed it into the ground. At this moment, a wisp of mist detached from the main body was trying to escape, but it was directly burned into a wisp of green smoke by this magical flame. Squeal! A piercing scream came from the mist, which then exploded into dozens of small mist balls flying in all directions. While Hugo and Veneto released electricity and flames to intercept the mist, a mist with a bloody glow inside rushed out of these mists and hit Veneto in an instant. Hugo felt a soul filled with coldness and negative emotions appear in the Admiral network, and then began to try to wreak havoc in this network. If this had happened a few years ago, this evil soul entering the Admiral network might have caused some problems, but now, with dozens of ship girls connected to the Admiral network, the attack carried by the soul was clearly not enough. After entering the Admiral network, the cold soul quickly turned into a cloud of black mist and tried to expand outwards, but soon a series of nets made purely of light appeared around the mist, enveloping it. The mist crashed left and right against the light net, but it couldn't break through no matter what. It was even unable to make any moves due to the suppression of the sacred power of the light net. Hugo realized at this time that this soul was very different from human souls, possessing some kind of abnormally strange penetrating ability. It would be very difficult to deal with without preparation. If he wasn't mistaken, this soul should be the core of that strange gray mist, and the reason it had directly hit Veneto and entered her soul was because it wanted to regain a physical body for itself. However, this guy obviously didn't expect Veneto's soul to be different from humans, so it directly rushed into the Admiral network and was strongly surrounded by the ship girls. Because of this, when the targeted holy light from Illustrious and St. George began to fill the Admiral network, it was much easier to deal with this cold soul than to deal with an ordinary soul of the same level, although the strength of this soul was equivalent to about 10 ordinary people, making it practically invincible when possessing ordinary life forms. It was like Firefly's vine with a bright moon compared to the souls of the ship girls. Therefore, the mist formed by the soul was firmly trapped at the core by the light net, and at the same time, its vitality became lower and lower, and it even stopped moving in the Admiral network in the end. Feeling that the opponent was no longer struggling, the ship girls manipulated the power in the Admiral network to shrink the light net step by step, while releasing increasingly powerful light. Finally, The light net compressed into a ball of light radiating a sun-like bright light outwards. And when this ball of light dimmed, a milky white transparent ball floated in the Admiral network, with a faint gray mist flowing quietly inside the ball. It seems that this group of she-devils is even more evil than we imagined. After capturing this spiritual entity, all the ship girls in the Admiral network began to analyze it, and a large amount of information was analyzed in less than a minute under normal circumstances. It might take a long time to analyze a spiritual body. Even black wizards of Voldemort's level would only limit the search target to a certain period of time as much as possible. However, for the ship girls connected by the Admiral network, their special soul structure allows them to quickly segment their memories and absorb them separately. Is there anything strange about that? Hugo asked, puzzled. These monsters are already extremely evil for using the killing of intelligent creatures to make potions. Is there anything worse than that? Of course there is, Veneto, who had just finished reading a lot of information, said. This Mother Night is completely different from ordinary night. She has lived for 600 years. 600 years, Hugo showed a shocked expression after hearing what Veneto said. Because according to the knowledge learned in class, although the lifespan of night is longer than that of humans, 200 to 220 years is already the limit. How did she do it? Just like you saw just now, the other party has a special soul transfer method. Veneto curled her lips and introduced. The method is to attach one's soul to other people's bodies like just now, and then seize the body for rebirth. However, in order to be able to do this, the other party needs to devour a complete soul almost every day. Because only in this way can they have enough soul strength to try to seize the body for rebirth. 600 years, that means the other party has devoured tens of thousands of souls. Hugo's face showed a shocked expression. Yes, that's why this night is called the Mother of Night, Veneto nodded. Even this secret base was built by her. Chapter 374 Arrive. From the memories of this Mother Night Hag, the ship girls obtained a very important piece of information. The Night Hag escapees were merely a cover for this base, while the true core was the Mother Night Hag herself, or rather, this base itself was one of the Mother Night Hag's dozen or so layers, and those escaped Night Hags were just one of the many forces under the Mother Night Hag. This also explains why the cave below looked so resplendent, because this wealth did not belong to those escapees with only a few decades of history, but to Mother Night Hag who had lived for 600 years. It's just that human wizards were completely unaware of this. And even the information the ship girls found in the Department of Magic didn't mention the Mother Night Hag at all. We have a lot of work to do next, Prestige, who was in charge of commanding, said. With this detailed information, I think we can launch an attack on the 17 Night Hag strongholds in Europe and North Africa. That sounds like a good thing. Looking at the Iowa sisters, who had collected the spoils from the cave below, including the Night Hag corpses, and came out through the subdimension, Hugo nodded subconsciously and then asked, by the way, have you determined where Harry was taken? I just saw Veneto cast a spell on Harry. Can that spell determine Harry's location? That's a beacon spell, a unique type of magic that allows us to release a signal that only we ship girls can acquire, Veneto quickly explained. However, because we were teleported away in such a hurry, I only cast a simplified version of this spell. Compared to the normal version, this simplified magic signal is weaker. In this way, the biggest advantage is that in the presence of enemies, it is difficult for them to detect our actions, but the disadvantage is that it is difficult to find the other party's location. Now, Skyark 1 is scanning over Britain, but because the signal is too weak, it may take some time to complete the scan, Missouri said at this time. Where are you guys right now? Just then, Hugo received a message from Hermione through the Admiral network. Everyone at school is going crazy. Sis, don't worry, we're fine here. Hearing Hermione's nervous tone, Hugo immediately comforted her. I have Veneto and the Iowa sisters with me now. Even if that noseless guy faces me head-on, he won't be my opponent. It's good that you're okay. I only heard Prestige say that you were alright, but I was a little worried before I confirmed it. Hermione breathed a sigh of relief. By the way, what's the situation at school right now? After seeing that his sister's emotions had returned to normal, Hugo asked Hermione. Has Harry been found yet? We haven't found him yet. Professor Flitwick and Enterprise are researching the place where Harry disappeared, but it's not that easy to reconstruct the other party's location from the clues. Knowing that her brother was okay, Hermione relaxed a lot. However, the disappearance of her friend Harry still filled her with worry. I have good news for you. Before Veneto and I were teleported away, Veneto left a beacon on Harry, but only ship girls can receive that beacon, Hugo said to his sister. Now our Skyark 1 is scanning for that signal nearby. Once a signal feedback is received, another emergency team on Skyark 1 will set off to rescue him. That's great. After hearing this news, Hermione paused for a moment and then asked, "About when will we be able to find his whereabouts?" "Not sure, because we don't know where they took Harry," Hugo relayed Missouri's words just now. "So we can only expand the scanning range outward from Hogwarts as the center." Wait, there's a signal. Just as Hugo and Hermione were communicating, a message suddenly came from the Admiral network. Just as the space station extended its exploration range to the southern coast of England, it suddenly received feedback. Specific location. Hugo immediately asked Prestige, who was staying at the space station, through the Admiral network. "Where did that noseless bastard choose this time?" "The southern coast of England, near the Isle of Wight," Prestige said, looking at the red dot on the projection map in front of her. "This broken place is in the middle of nowhere. God knows why that guy chose this place as his resurrection site, but for us, being able to determine the target location is enough. St. George and Lee Fantastic have already set off in a fast shuttle and will arrive at Harry's location in 3 minutes. That's good." After looking at the map sent through the Admiral network, Hugo showed a relaxed smile, because they had already sent out the most suitable ship girl for this situation. The reason Voldemort chose such a remote wilderness was most likely because Hugo and the others' raids on him during the summer vacation had left a deep impression on Voldemort. As a result, when he was truly resurrected, Voldemort abandoned his original ritualistic habits and did not choose a location related to him, but randomly selected a place. It has to be said that Voldemort's approach did bring Hugo a lot of trouble. So much so that it took them half a day to pinpoint the other party's exact location. However, this place also has a good aspect for Hugo and the others. That is, the other party chose to complete this ritual on English soil, so Hugo happened to have a ship girl who was very suitable for this area. Just as the Iowa sisters on Hugo's side boarded the shuttle around them to return to Skyark Space Station, St. George and Lee Fantastic were riding in a 2-person shuttle straight to the seaside where Harry was. Boom! After a collision that wasn't too violent, the single-person shuttle landed in the sea. The reason they didn't choose land was because the various equipment on Skyark Station was not perfect, so they couldn't guide the shuttle to land accurately. Of course, there was also a main reason. It was not clear whether Voldemort had left the pot, so for the ship girls, choosing to land on the sea, which was more beneficial to them, was a natural choice. And when St. George rode her white horse from her ship outfit, stepping on the waves and rising from the sea, she happened to see the blood in a crystal bottle dripping into a huge stone cauldron through the water mist. Seeing this, St. George immediately waved the white flag with a red cross in her hand and pointed it at the cauldron, and then launched a bright holy light. Just as the holy light approached the cauldron, the flames under the stone cauldron immediately turned dark blue and quickly enveloped the entire cauldron, blocking the holy light launched by St. George. At this moment, Peter let out a scream, because after the flame barrier was touched by the holy light, it splashed everywhere, and some of it hit him and spread over his body. Chapter 375 Fight. Clearly, the magic that could revive Voldemort was not simple. Besides the potion in the pot, both the cauldron itself and the flames beneath it were special. However, from another perspective, because the magic used for resurrection was dark magic, the various effective components of this magical ritual would naturally not be normal magic. For example, after Peter was hit by the splash flames, he cast several spells on himself trying to extinguish the fire, but all of these spells failed, and he could only be engulfed in the flames amidst screams. Amidst this chaos, Kong Xiong took advantage of the water mist floating in the air to quickly circle around to the back of the flat ground, and then quickly moved towards Harry's location. Avada Kedavra, seeing the uninvited guest in the water mist kill Peter with one blow, Barty Crouch Jr. immediately dropped the dagger and bottle in his hand, drew his wand, and used the killing curse. But this curse didn't have any effect, because the fog obscured everything, so the spell didn't even manage to aim at St. George hidden in the mist, and flew past about 1 meter away from her. After being attacked, St. George immediately launched a counterattack, pouring a large amount of holy light power into the spear in her hand, and then throwing it forcefully. At this time, Barty Crouch Jr. had already realized that something was wrong and tried to defend. But before the magic could be released, he was nailed to the throat by the spear thrown by St. George. The force was so great that Barty Crouch Jr. flew 5 or 6 meters and was pinned to a tree. Then his neck, severely injured, could not withstand the weight and impact of his body and broke in the middle. A bit cruel. I hope it doesn't cause any psychological trauma to Harry, Kong Xiong thought, looking at the dismembered Barty Crouch Jr., then cut the ropes on Harry's body with a small knife and whispered, Quickly follow me and escape. Run. If you don't run now, are you waiting to die? After saying that, Kong Xiong pulled Harry up abruptly and ran towards the bushes not far away. Fortunately, St. George was attracting a lot of attention, and the large amount of white mist created in the seawater successfully concealed their movements. Knowing that Kong Xiong had successfully taken Harry away from the scene, St. George drew her sword and rode her white horse towards the cauldron where Voldemort was stewing. At this moment, a man's black figure slowly rose from the cauldron, tall and thin, like a skeleton. Voldemort had successfully revived. However, as soon as he was resurrected, Voldemort rolled out of the stone pot in a very embarrassing posture, then turned into black smoke and flew a few meters away. Because St. George was riding her horse and charging over with her spear. Voldemort was indeed an extremely powerful dark wizard, but without a wand in his hand and stark naked, he still couldn't do much against a cavalry charging fiercely, especially when he waved his hand at Peter's charred corpse immediately after getting out of the pot. Trying to recall his wand, he only recalled half of the wand's remains, still emitting sparks. Good heavens! Petrify Voldemort! Through the Admiral network, almost all the ship girls saw this eye-watering scene through St. George's eyes after discovering that the first strike missed. St. George immediately turned her horse around and charged again with her spear. After all, Voldemort was the final boss, so she subconsciously used the strongest skill called Dragon Slayer Strike. Unfortunately, this skill named after dragon slaying naturally has advantages against those huge targets, but it is not so accurate when facing a single person, especially when facing Voldemort. St. George subconsciously injected powerful force into it, which made her movements a little slow, so that Voldemort successfully avoided this strike. The reason why Voldemort dodged so embarrassingly was that if it was just a physical impact, Voldemort could easily block it even without anything, but from the tip of St. George's spear, he felt a power so strong that it would pose a life threat to him. The fact was just as Voldemort thought. Because St. George realized her trouble after the first strike missed, so in the second strike, she only fainted, and in reality, she destroyed the stone cauldron with one blow. Unlike the original, this stone cauldron was obtained from the family of the French victim, and it not only had powerful magic defense, but also could stimulate a strong spatial interference effect under the burning of magical flames. So when St. George realized that it was difficult for her to kill Voldemort in his current state with one blow, she chose to destroy the source of interference to open up a passage for the follow-up troops. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Voldemort summoned his wand from Barty Crouch Jr.'s dismembered corpse. Then he raised his wand and tried to aim it at St. George to release magic, but at this moment, he suddenly heard a very slight crackling explosion behind him, followed by a gust of wind rushing from top to bottom towards the back of his head. What? Hearing the wind, Voldemort tried to transform into black smoke and move his position as soon as possible, but unfortunately, he was still a little slow when the black smoke he turned into reformed into a human shape in an open space more than 10 meters away. His right arm holding the wand, along with his shoulder, had completely disappeared, leaving only a wound constantly gushing blood in the place where he had just disappeared. A girl wearing a whole set of 19th century military uniform style coat, with long golden hair, was holding a military knife, and drops of black blood were dripping down the blade and falling to the ground. The blood dripped on the ground, making a sizzling sound, and the vegetation on the ground quickly shrank and carbonized as if sulfuric acid had been dripped on it. And beside this girl, Voldemort's arm holding the wand, along with a piece of shoulder, was falling at her feet. Obviously, if Voldemort had moved a little slower just now, this resurrection would have been in vain. What made Voldemort feel the most stimulating was that both the knight riding the white horse and the golden-haired girl were wearing half-golden masks on their faces and sea-blue cloaks on their bodies, which reminded him of the group who attacked him during the summer vacation. Realizing that he was likely to be unable to win today without his wand in hand, Voldemort glanced at his two dismembered and charred lackeys with blood-red eyes, then left after uttering harsh words. Voldemort's direct escape greatly exceeded the expectations of the two ship girls present, so they could only watch Voldemort disappear into the thin air. Isn't that guy the Dark Lord? He ran away so despondently. Richelieu lightly shook off the blood on the knife, sheathed it, and looked at St. George and asked, after all, the wizards here are very dependent on their wands, so running away without a wand should be said to be the most reasonable tactic, otherwise they would definitely have to go back and stew in the pot again. St. George put away her horse and spear, then shrugged and said, "End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, Subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.